Idaho's forests stretch for miles, filled with towering pines, mist-covered valleys, and hidden trails. Rising above these woods are Firewatch towers, once lifelines for firefighters, now standing alone, abandoned, and eerily silent. But these towers are more than relics, they are haunted. Visitors and locals report shadowy figures climbing the stairs, whispers echoing across the treetops, and strange lights glowing at night. Some say the spirits of past firewatchers linger, trapped by tragic accidents, unexplained deaths, or the isolation of their posts. Others claim the towers are gateways to something darker, watching and waiting for those who dare approach. Tonight, we will explore 25 of Idaho's most haunted Firewatch towers, where the forest itself seems alive, the air thrums with unseen energy, and the ghosts of those who stood vigil long ago refuse to rest. Step carefully. The wind may carry whispers from the treetops. The boards beneath your feet may creak under unseen weight, and shadows may flicker where no living being stands. The Bear Creek Firewatch Tower stands deep within the Boise National Forest, a place long abandoned yet never truly empty. Rising above dense pines and rugged terrain, the old wooden structure was once a lifeline for early fire lookouts. Today, it is a decaying relic perched against the sky, its timbers weathered by decades of storms, snowfall, and silence. But visitors who wander close to it speak of something else, something that lingers in the shadows, as persistent as the faint smell of old smoke that still clings to the air. The tower hasn't been operational since the late 1960s. Records show that the last lookout stationed there left abruptly, never giving a clear reason beyond personal circumstances. Rumors filled the gap left by missing facts. Some claimed he had gone mad from isolation. Others said the forest itself whispered to him each night, driving him away. A few insisted he never left at all, that he simply vanished from the tower one morning, leaving his lantern still burning on the desk and the logbook open to an unfinished sentence. Officially, none of those stories were ever confirmed. Unofficially, people continue to swear there is truth buried within them. Hikers who pass near the tower often describe the same unsettling sensation, the feeling of being watched from above. Some say they've looked up and seen a shadow standing at the top of the platform, its form still and silent against the dimming sky. They climb the stairs to investigate if they dare, but always find the platform empty. The air grows colder the higher they go, and many report hearing slow, steady footsteps on the wooden boards beneath them, even when they are alone. The sound is unmistakable, weight shifting, planks creaking, someone pacing just a few steps ahead, leading them upward. The footsteps sometimes stop abruptly, as though the unseen presence suddenly remembers it is not supposed to be heard. Then everything falls silent, except for the wind weaving through the beams. That silence never feels natural. Visitors say it feels heavy, like the forest itself is holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. There is also the smell, always faint, always unexpected. Even in the middle of winter, when the world is blanketed by snow and nothing burns for miles, hikers catch a sharp scent of smoke drifting from the tower. Not the smell of fresh firewood, but old smoke, the kind that clings to clothes and walls after a fire has long died out. It hovers around the base of the tower and grows stronger on the climb up, as if someone had tended a fire inside the lookout only hours earlier. Yet there is no stove, no ashes, no sign of any flame. Boise National Forest staff occasionally check the structure for safety, though even they admit the place unsettles them. Some refuse to go near it after sunset. One ranger, who asked to remain anonymous, said that while inspecting the tower a few years ago, he felt something brush past him on the stairs. The air shifted around him, cold and swift, as though someone had hurried by in a desperate rush. He immediately descended, only to hear the unmistakable sound of someone running up the steps behind him. When he turned, no one was there. The tower was empty, except for the echoes of his own breathing. Locals in the nearby small towns speak of the tower with a mix of respect and caution. To them, Bear Creek Firewatch Tower is not just a relic, it is a place caught between the past and whatever comes after. Older residents remember an incident whispered about for decades. a fire that swept through a remote section of the forest long before the tower was decommissioned. They say the lookout on duty spotted it too late. By the time he signaled for help, the wind had turned against him. The flames spread rapidly, trapping several firefighters who had rushed into the area. None survived. Some say the lookout never forgave himself. Others say he was one of the victims, unable to escape the encroaching wall of fire. In either version of the story, those who believe the tale insist the tower holds on to the memory of that night. They claim the shadowy figure seen at the top is either the lookout still keeping watch, unable to abandon his post, or one of the lost firefighters wandering back to the place where the signal was last sent. Nighttime brings out the most disturbing reports. Hikers camping nearby speak of waking to the sound of crackling flames, only to see nothing when they step outside their tents. They sometimes notice a dim, flickering glow at the top of the tower, as though a lantern has been lit. The light fades the moment anyone approaches. A few claim they've heard a voice calling from the platform, low and urgent, warning them to turn back, to leave before it's too late. The words are never completely clear, distorted by wind and distance. But the tone is unmistakable. Caution, fear, desperation. Those who ignore the voice or fail to move quickly enough often describe a strange pressure in their chest as they climb the stairs, like the air is tightening around them. Some feel suddenly short of breath, overwhelmed by the sense that they've stepped into a place where they do not belong. The higher they climb, the worse the feeling becomes, until they are forced to turn back. The moment their feet touch the ground, the panic dissipates as quickly as it came, leaving them shaken and confused. Despite all these reports, or perhaps because of them, people continue to visit Bear Creek Firewatch Tower. Curiosity draws them in. Legends pull them closer. They want to see the shadow figure for themselves, hear the footsteps, catch that lingering scent of smoke that refuses to fade. Most come away with a story to tell. A few refuse to ever return. The tower stands alone, year after year, untouched by restoration efforts and unclaimed by the passage of time. The forest grows around it, the wind hums through its beams, and the sky above it shifts from blue to star-swept black. But whatever remains inside whatever memory or spirit or echo stays rooted in place, watching over the trees in silence. Visitors say that if you stand at the base of the tower long enough, just as dusk settles and the forest dimly glimmers in fading light, you might see it too. A shadow at the top, unmoving, waiting forever, keeping watch over a forest that long ago burned, and a guilt that refuses to die. Granite Peak Tower stands alone on a wind-carved ridge in the Sawtooth National Forest, a weather-beaten silhouette rising above the sprawling wilderness. From a distance, it looks like any old fire lookout, an aging structure with wooden beams and a square observation room perched at the top. But those who climb the rugged trail toward it, especially as evening falls, quickly realize that something about the tower feels different from the others that dot Idaho's backcountry. Granite Peak Tower is quiet in a way that unsettles the bones, a silence that seems to listen rather than rest. Decades ago, the tower buzzed with activity. Fire lookouts spent long summers up there scanning miles of forest for the first sign of trouble. But after a series of strange incidents in the late 1970s, the tower was abandoned. The official reason cited structural safety and lack of funding, but locals still whisper about what truly happened, stories of a lookout who vanished without a trace, and a series of unexplained lights that flickered inside the observation room long after the tower was closed. Today the trail is rough, climbing through dense pines and granite outcroppings. Hikers who make the ascent often describe an eerie sensation as they near the top, as if the air around them suddenly drops in temperature. Even in the summer, a strange cold draft wraps around the path just below the tower, chilling the skin and quickening the pulse. Some describe it as a warning, others as an invitation. A few say the cold seems to whisper against their ears, faint as breath, too soft to understand, yet too unmistakable to ignore. The phantom lights are what most people come to see. The observation room, long sealed and empty, still glows at night from time to time. Dozens of hikers, campers, and even a few forest rangers claim they've seen it, a pale yellow shimmer, like an old lantern swinging gently from the ceiling. Sometimes the light pulses, Sometimes it flickers rapidly, and at least one person swears it moved across the room, as if carried by an unseen hand. No one has ever found a source for the glow. There is no electricity, no lanterns, no reflective surfaces. The room is empty except for a rusted chair, dust-covered walls, and a shattered pane of glass that rattles in the wind. But the lights are just the beginning. Locals in the nearby communities of Stanley and Ketchum talk about the whispers that drift through the trees around Granite Peak. They say the forest calls out to people by name. Some hikers have frozen mid-step after hearing their names whispered from somewhere behind them, even when they were completely alone. Others describe a voice that sounds familiar, like a friend or a family member, urging them to climb the tower or turn back. Occasionally, someone hears multiple voices blending together, as if several people are murmuring in a low, urgent tone. One man, a hunter, who frequented the area in the early 2000s, claimed he heard his brother's voice calling him from the tower. His brother had died years before. The hunter said the voice wasn't ghostly or far away. It was clear, warm, and unmistakable. He followed it all the way to the tower steps before he realized that the voice had been calling his name over and over, each time more forcefully. He turned and ran, refusing to look back. When he reached town, he swore that the final whisper had come from right behind his ear. Whatever calls from Granite Peak Tower isn't content to stay inside the building. Rangers who used to monitor the tower for safety maintenance say they often felt watched as they approached. One ranger reported feeling a cold presence pass straight through him as he climbed the last set of steps, like stepping into a pocket of icy air that breathed around him. Another ranger, who retired years ago, told a story few believe, but many repeat. While inspecting the tower one late afternoon, he heard footsteps pacing across the observation room above him. Slow, deliberate steps, something heavy shifting its weight. When he reached the top, the room was empty, and the phantom lights glowed faintly behind him as he descended the stairs. Some believe the spirit of the missing lookout remains there, bound to the place he served until his final night. Others think the tower is a vessel for something older, something tied to the land rather than the structure. The Sawtooth Wilderness has a long history of strange lore. Stories passed down through native communities about voices in the mountains, and spirit lights that guide or mislead those who wander too far alone. Granite Peak Tower may simply sit at a crossroads of these old forces, a place where the veil thins in ways that modern explanations cannot fully grasp. Despite these tales, or perhaps because of them, the tower has become a magnet for hikers seeking a thrill. Some camp at the base just to watch the windows after dark, hopeful for a glimpse of that eerie glow. Many leave before sunrise, claiming the forest felt too alive, too watchful, too intent on calling them closer. A few brave souls climb the tower at night, but most admit they never make it to the top. They stop halfway, overcome by the sensation of someone following them up the steps, someone whose breaths they cannot hear, whose footsteps they cannot see, but whose presence they feel with bone-deep certainty. Wind dies suddenly, as if something enormous is holding its breath. Even animals that usually roam freely, deer, foxes, mountain goats, seem to avoid the ridge entirely. The silence grows heavier with each step upward, settling over the trail like a warning no one needs spoken aloud. Granite Peak Tower stands unchanged through it all. Storms batter it, winters freeze it, summers scorch its aging boards. Yet it remains a solitary sentinel, watching over the sprawling Sawtooth Wilderness. The phantom lights continue to glow from its windows. The whispers drift through the thinning air, and the cold drafts linger like fingers brushing across the skin. Those who make the journey say the tower feels like a memory that refuses to fade, a story still unfolding long after the last lookout left. Whatever remains within its walls continues to call out, searching for someone who might answer. And the whispers of the Sawtooth will echo through the forest, calling names carried by the wind. The Salmon River Firewatch stands on a lonely ridge in the Salmon Valley National Forest, overlooking miles of rugged backcountry, where the mountains rise like jagged monuments and the river winds in silver ribbons far below. once a crucial outpost for detecting wildfires. The tower is now an abandoned shell, battered by storms and decades of isolation. Its wooden beams creak in the constant wind, and its observation room, empty for almost half a century, stares out across the wilderness like a watchful eye. Yet those who come near it say it is still far from abandoned. Something lingers in the tower, something that walks, watches, and waits. Hikers along the ridge trail often speak of shadowy shapes drifting through the tree line surrounding the tower. These shapes appear at dawn or dusk, when the forest dims and the boundaries between form and shadow blur. They move slowly, deliberately, often disappearing behind thick pines only to reappear much closer than before. Some visitors describe them as tall figures, others as silhouettes without distinct features. A few claim these figures seem to be watching the tower itself, circling it like silent sentinels. It did not seem to breathe. When he blinked, the figure vanished, only for another to materialize several yards behind him. He left the trail immediately, too unnerved to continue. Many others have shared similar accounts, always the same silent forms, always the same proximity to the Firewatch tower. Approaching the Salmon River Firewatch brings its own set of peculiar sensations. Visitors say they feel an unnatural chill, even during summer, as though the tower radiates coldness from within its wooden frame. Some describe an overwhelming sense that they are not supposed to be there, that something unseen is scrutinizing every step they take. The air becomes still, empty of bird calls or rustling leaves. Even the wind seems hesitant to move too close. But it is the knocking that unsettles most visitors. The sound often begins as hikers draw within 50 yards of the tower. 3 slow knocks, hollow and rhythmic, echoing from the observation room above. The sound is unmistakable, as if someone inside is rapping gently on the wall. When hikers step closer, the knocking grows louder, sometimes shifting from the walls to the stairway railing, as though an unseen hand is following their approach. Some have heard frantic knocking, rapid and urgent, like someone trapped inside and desperately trying to get out. No one has ever found a natural explanation for the sounds. There are no loose beams or wildlife capable of producing the distinct, human-like knocks that echo through the air. The structure is old, but the knocks are too deliberate, too patterned, too unmistakably intentional. And then there are the footsteps. Nearly every person who climbs the stairs reports hearing footsteps behind them, measured, heavy steps that ascend the stairs in perfect rhythm with their own. The footsteps never lag, never hurry, and never stop until the visitor does. When hikers turn around, the staircase is empty. But the creaking of the wood, the weight pressing against each step, feels undeniably real. Some claim they felt the stairs shift slightly, as though someone unseen stood just a few inches behind them. One experienced mountaineer told a story of climbing the tower alone on a foggy afternoon. He reached the second landing when he felt a faint tingle at the back of his neck, followed by a soft thud behind him. He turned, expecting another hiker but saw nothing. As he continued upward, the footsteps resumed, growing heavier the higher he climbed. By the time he reached the observation room, the feeling was so overwhelming he refused to enter. He descended in a panic, the unseen footsteps chasing him all the way down until he stumbled off the final step and sprinted down the trail. Local residents in Salmon and Shalley have passed down their own legends about the Firewatch for generations. The most common tale centers around a lookout who went missing in the early 1970s. The man was reportedly dedicated but often spoke of feeling uneasy at night when the wind quieted and darkness settled around the ridge. In his final logbook entry, found on the desk inside the observation room, he wrote a single line: "There is someone outside the tower. He was never seen again." Some believe the ghostly figures wandering the forest are former firefighters who died battling wildfires along the Salmon River corridor. Their spirits bound to the land they once tried to protect. Others insist the missing lookout himself roams the trees, watching over the tower he never left. A more unsettling theory suggests that whatever lives within the tower may not be human at all. Wilderness, this vast, locals say, has always been home to forces older than recorded history, spirits of the mountains, watchers of the forest, entities that linger long after the land has changed hands. Nightfall brings the most chilling encounters. Campers nearby have reported hearing the knocking echo through the darkness, sometimes repeating every few minutes, like a clock counting down the hours. A handful of daring hikers who stayed to watch the tower after dark claim to have seen a faint figure climb the stairs, a pale silhouette that moves with unnatural smoothness. The figure reaches the observation deck, pauses, and then simply dissolves into the night air. The area surrounding the tower has gained a reputation as one of the most unsettling places in the Salmon Valley National Forest. Even daytime visitors speak of feeling drained, as though something about the ridge tugs at their energy and attention. The forest seems to quiet itself around the tower, as if acknowledging a presence that demands silence. Yet, despite all the stories, the Salmon River Firewatch remains a draw for those fascinated by the unknown. Adventurers seek it out, hoping to experience its eerie phenomena for themselves. Some leave with a renewed respect for the wilderness. Others leave shaken, certain they encountered something unexplainable. Many vow never to return. Still, the tower stands, weathered but unwavering, perched high above the Salmon River. Ghostly figures glide through the surrounding forest, knocking echoes from its empty walls. Footsteps climb its wooden stairs, always following, never revealing their source. And the abandoned lookout remains a silent sentinel, holding its secrets tight against the winds that sweep across the rugged Idaho mountains. Lost Creek Tower stands high above the rolling expanse of the Payette National Forest, perched on a rocky bluff where the wind never seems to rest. From a distance, the old fire lookout resembles a skeletal outline against a sky, its weathered timbers bleached by decades of sun, storms, and abandonment. Yet, for all its decay, the tower remains strangely captivating, drawing hikers and curious wanderers who feel compelled to climb the steep trail that leads to its summit. But those who make the journey rarely forget it, because Lost Creek Tower is more than an old structure left to time. It is a place where echoes of the past never stopped, where shadows repeat old routines, and where something still watches the forest as if waiting for smoke to rise again. As sunset approaches, the tower changes. The air grows sharper, colder, and unnervingly still. Birds retreat into the trees. The forest hushes, as if bracing for a shift in the world, and then the shadows begin to move. Hikers have reported seeing dark shapes gliding around the base of the tower, figures without detail, silhouettes without edges. They rise from the tree line and drift along the rocky slope before disappearing behind the structure. Some appear at the platform, standing motionless against a fading light. Others climb the stairs in soundless strides. Always at sunset, always when the sky burns orange and the world hovers in that thin place between day and night. One hiker describes seeing a tall figure standing near the tower railing, hands resting on the wooden beam, staring out across the vast forest below. The figure was motionless, more outline than form. When the hiker called out, the shape turned its head slowly, not with curiosity, but with an uncanny awareness. Before he could react, another shadow appeared on the steps, then another, as if the tower were suddenly occupied again, just like it had been decades earlier. He fled before the sun fully set, shaken by the sense that none of those figures had noticed him at all. They were reenacting something older, something routine, as if trapped in an endless loop. The strange activity doesn't end with the shadows. Many visitors speak of hearing eerie calls echoing through the trees. Sometimes the calls resemble the distant shout of a lookout relaying information. Other times they sound like warnings, sharp, clipped cries that cut through the forest air. A few hikers insist they've heard their names carried on the wind, whispered in a tone that feels far too close for comfort. Even seasoned outdoorsmen admit that the voices around Lost Creek Tower feel different, more intentional, more aware. Most bewildering of all are the alarms. The tower has been non-operational for decades. Its wiring is long removed, its equipment stripped. Yet hikers swear they heard faint alarm bells ringing near the observation room, the exact sound old fire monitors would make when smoke was detected in the distance. Some describe it as a soft, rhythmic chime. Others say the ringing comes suddenly, sharp and urgent, like a signal that danger is near. The sound often occurs right at sunset, blending with the shifting shadows that gather around the structure. A retired ranger once shared his own unsettling experience. Years ago, while checking a nearby trail after a storm, he passed within 100 yards of the tower. Just as the sky began to dim, he heard the unmistakable ring of the old alert system, a sound he hadn't heard since the 1970s. When he turned toward the tower, a shadow figure appeared on the platform, its shape dark against the fading light. Another figure stepped behind it, as if preparing for a long night of vigilance. The ranger left immediately, refusing to return without another officer beside him. He later admitted that the tower seemed alive, replaying its past, as though it had never been shut down. The history behind Lost Creek Tower only deepens the mystery. In the early years of operation, the tower was manned by small teams of lookouts who rotated shifts throughout the summer months. They watched for lightning strikes, rising smoke, and signs of danger in the sprawling Payette wilderness. According to local accounts, one particularly dry summer brought a series of intense lightning storms. Multiple fires ignited across the forest. The lookout team at Lost Creek Tower worked day and night, sending radio calls and alarms to warn rangers of incoming flare-ups. But as the fires grew and smoke filled the sky, communication became erratic. At some point during the chaos, the tower fell silent. When a crew arrived days later to check on the lookouts, they found the tower empty, lanterns still warm, chairs overturned, and the alarm system still faintly ringing even though no one had triggered it. The lookout team was never found. Since then, locals believe the tower continues its last duties, replaying the final moments of those who disappeared. Shadowy figures walking their patrols. Phantom alarms sounding warnings no one hears. Echoed voices calling out into a forest that no longer responds. Campers near Lost Creek often report waking in the middle of the night to faint ringing drifting through the trees. Some hear footsteps moving outside their tents, slow and purposeful, before fading away. Others see dim lights flickering near the tower, as if lanterns were being carried up and down the stairs. These lights vanish the moment anyone approaches, leaving only cold, still air and the lingering sensation of being watched. Despite its unsettling reputation, Lost Creek Tower remains a popular destination for thrill seekers and paranormal enthusiasts. The trail leading to it is considered moderate, but many hikers confess that the real challenge begins at dusk. They describe a sense of heaviness in the air, as if the forest itself is holding a memory it refuses to release. Clearwater River Tower stands deep within the towering pines of the Clearwater National Forest, perched at the edge of a steep ridge that overlooks miles of untouched wilderness. From a distance, it appears serene, an aging wooden fire lookout, silhouetted against the rolling mountains and the distant shimmer of the river far below. But anyone who ventures close quickly senses that the tower is far from quiet. Even after decades of abandonment, Clearwater River Tower feels occupied, watched, alive in ways that defy explanation. Visitors speak first and most often of the figure. Always a lone silhouette standing in the observation room. Always motionless. Always watching. Some hikers notice the figure as they round the final bend in the trail. A tall outline framed by the glassless windows, standing perfectly still at the center of the room. Others see it only from the base of the tower, a shape shifting slightly as they climb the first steps. A few have captured photographs that show a dark form inside, even when they swear no one was there moments before. What terrifies most people is how quickly the figure disappears. One blink, one shift in the wind, and the observation room is empty once again. But anyone who has seen it agrees on one thing: the figure is aware. It doesn't just exist in the tower, it watches. The whispers begin soon after the figure vanishes. They float out from the tower walls, threading through the trees like faint currents of air. Some sound like fragments of conversation, cut short and unintelligible. Others resemble warnings, spoken too softly to fully understand. A few hikers have heard their own names whispered from somewhere above, the syllables stretching oddly, as if spoken by a voice unused to forming human sounds. One backpacker reported hearing a whisper repeat the word "wait" over and over, each time louder, more insistent. Another hiker described hearing two separate voices, one calm and low, the other urgent and strained, as if an unseen argument was unfolding inside the abandoned room. When she climbed the tower stairs to investigate, the voices fell silent, replaced only by her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. The cold winds add another layer to the unease. Clearwater National Forest can certainly be chilly, but visitors claim the winds around the tower are different, soothing, sharp gusts that cut through layers of clothing and leave skin prickling with goosebumps. They sweep across the ridge without warning, rattling the wooden beams and stirring the air inside the tower even when the forest below remains still. Some describe the winds as icy hands pushing against their backs. Others say the wind seems to whisper along with the unseen voices, blending natural sound with something far stranger. One man recounted reaching the base of the tower on a warm summer evening. The air was still, the forest buzzing with insects. But as soon as he placed a hand on the first stair, an icy blast struck him hard enough to stagger him. The temperature dropped so fast, his breath turned white. A low whisper circled him, growing louder the higher he climbed. When he reached the observation room, the cold vanished instantly, but the feeling of being watched intensified until he had to retreat. And then there are the lights. Clearwater River Tower has no electricity. The power lines were removed decades ago, and the interior holds nothing more than dust, old paperwork, and rusted equipment. Yet countless hikers have reported seeing lights flicker inside the observation room. Sometimes the glow is faint, like the beam of an old lantern swaying in the breeze. Other times the light pulses brightly, illuminating the entire tower in brief flashes. A few campers pitched nearby have seen the entire room brighten as though someone was scanning the forest with a handheld flashlight. One group of friends camping along the ridge watched in shock as a soft golden light filled the observation room for nearly a full minute. They thought another group had arrived and taken shelter inside. The next morning, they climbed the tower and found no footprints, no equipment, no signs anyone had been there. The dust on the floor was undisturbed, except for a single long streak leading toward the center of the room, as if something had been standing there, watching them through the night. Locals in nearby towns like Orofino and Cusquia have their own stories about the tower, passed down through generations. The most common tale tells of a former fire lookout who vanished without a trace in the early 1960s. His last entries in the logbook mention unusual lights along the river, cold winds sweeping into the tower at odd hours, and the sense of someone walking the perimeter each night, even though he was alone. Search teams found no sign of him. His gear remained neatly arranged. A Hofferton report sat on the desk, the pen still uncapped. The chair faced a window, as if he had stood up to greet someone, or something that never left. Some believe the figure seen today is the missing lookout, bound to the tower after decades of solitary duty. Others claim the tower predates its official construction in ways few understand. Standing on a ridge that was once a site of ancient rituals or gatherings, a few insist the movements, whispers, and lights are not ghostly echoes, but manifestations of something older, something tied to the land itself, an intelligence that watches over the forest in silence. Whatever the truth, Clearwater River Tower continues to draw those who seek the strange and unexplainable. Some hikers approach out of curiosity, others out of a desire to prove the legends wrong. Most leave with more questions than answers. They describe feeling drained, as if the tower absorbs the warmth and energy around it. They mention hearing footsteps in the observation room when it should be empty, or feeling the air shift as though someone has just passed by. Many promise never to return, yet each year more wanderers make the climb. passing through the thick pines and across the narrow ridge toward the lonely tower that never sleeps. They arrive expecting an ordinary abandoned lookout and leave with the unnerving certainty that something still stands guard inside. A lone figure, a voice carried by the wind, a flicker of impossible light in a place without power. Clearwater River Tower remains on its perch above the forest, watching the river wind through the valleys below. And as long as it stands, the whispers will follow, the winds will chill, and the lights will flicker reminders that some places are never truly empty, no matter how many years pass. The Big Cottonwood Firewatch, in the heart of the Boise National Forest, has long stood as a sentinel against the encroaching wilderness. A wooden tower, perched on a ridge where storms gather like brooding spirits. Long after its official decommissioning, hikers still follow the trail upward, drawn by the sweeping views and the strange stories that cling to the structure like lichen to old stone. They arrive expecting only wind and silence. But they often leave with unsettled expressions, insisting they heard things, felt things that no abandoned tower should be able to produce. Over the years, those stories have formed the eerie reputation of the Big Cottonwood Firewatch, a place where time lingers and something unseen continues to pace the floors. On clear days, the tower looks peaceful. The sun lights up the weathered boards, and the windows of the observation room glitter faintly. Nothing seems out of place. But as hikers step inside, a shift in the air becomes impossible to ignore. The temperature drops just enough to raise goosebumps, even in summer. The silence deepens unnaturally, as though the world outside the tower has been muffled or pushed away. Many visitors say their first sign of the tower's lingering presence is the sound of footsteps, light, steady, and unmistakably human, echoing across the floors above them. They stand still, listening, expecting someone to descend the stairs at any moment. No one ever does. Some hikers venture up to the second level, hoping to find a stray visitor or another curious explorer. Instead, they find the room empty, dust undisturbed, and the wooden boards silent beneath their own weight. Yet the footsteps continue, pacing just behind them, crossing from one end of the room to the other. A few visitors have even reported rushing back down the stairs, only to hear the phantom steps following them, keeping time with their own frightened descent. The Big Cottonwood Firewatch seems to come alive most often at dusk. As the sun dips behind the ridge, the shadows lengthen, and the forest hums with the shifting of animals settling for the night. It's at this hour that figures have been seen ascending the narrow staircase, just barely visible in the fading light. People describe them as silhouettes, human in shape but strangely muted, as though made from smoke or shadow. They climb steadily upward but vanish before reaching the next floor. Those who witness this freeze where they stand, transfixed and unable to understand how something so clearly visible could dissolve into nothing. One hiker reported watching a figure step onto the landing just below the observation deck. The silhouette paused, turned as if acknowledging him, and then simply melted into the wooden planks beneath its feet. The hiker fled the tower and did not return until months later, accompanied by friends in broad daylight. Even then, he refused to climb past the first level. The alarms are another mystery, distant, hollow, and unmistakably mechanical. Some describe them as the old-fashioned bells the tower once used to alert nearby crews. Others say the sound resembles an electronic tone, something too modern for a decommissioned structure. Regardless of description, the alarms seem to trigger without warning, ringing through the forest as though an unseen danger is being signaled. Hikers freeze, listening to the eerie echo bounce between the trees. But the moment they try to locate the source, the sound stops abruptly, replaced by silence thick enough to swallow their breath. A local man who frequents the area claims the alarms always come in threes. He insists that every time he's heard them, the sequence repeats. 3 rising tones, a pause, then 3 more. He believes the spirits of former firewatchers are still on duty, sounding warnings about dangers no living person can perceive. Whether he means storms, wildfires, or something less natural, he refuses to elaborate. Inside the observation room, the highest point of the tower, the atmosphere is often the most charged. Visitors step into the square space and feel immediately watched. The windows rattle, Even when there is no wind, shadows shift across the walls, though no clouds pass overhead. A deep cold settles into the bones of anyone who lingers too long. Some claim that as soon as they look through the windows toward the surrounding forest, they feel a presence standing beside them, as though peering out over the landscape with them. One woman describes seeing a faint reflection in the glass, another face beside her own. It was pale, indistinct, and seemed to be mouthing words she couldn't hear. When she spun around, expecting someone behind her, the room remained empty. Moments later, she heard footsteps circle the observation deck outside. Even though the wooden planks had been partially removed years earlier and no one could have walked on them safely. For all its eerie encounters, the Big Cottonwood Firewatch remains a place people return to. Perhaps it's the breathtaking view, or perhaps it's the allure of experiencing something unexplainable. Those who visit at night often describe an overwhelming pull, a sense that the tower is not just abandoned but waiting. The forest below rustles and shifts, as though holding its breath, and the tower creaks softly, settling as if under a familiar, unseen weight. Whatever lingers in the Big Cottonwood Firewatch seems neither malicious nor welcoming. It simply is a presence bound to its post, pacing the floors as it once did in life, sounding alarms for dangers long gone, and climbing stairs that no longer lead anywhere. Visitors leave with the impression that the tower continues its eternal vigil, overlooked by the living but never truly empty. And somewhere within those aging walls, footsteps continue to echo, marking time long after the world has moved on. Perched on a jagged ridge high above the sweeping pines of the Sawtooth National Forest, Eagle Peak Tower stands like a lonely sentinel against the wind. Its wooden frame, bleached by years of snow and sun, has long been abandoned by Forest Service crews. Yet it remains a place hikers seek out, some for the panoramic view, others for the stories that drift through the region like mist moving between trees. Eagle Peak Tower is quiet by day, but as dusk approaches, the mountain seems to exhale, and the tower wakes in ways no earthly watchman ever could. Visitors often describe the approach to Eagle Peak Tower as unnerving. The trail winds tightly along steep cliffs, and the forest grows strangely silent the closer one gets. Birds fall quiet. Wind becomes a low whisper. The air feels heavier, as though carrying memories older than the trees themselves. Many hikers report a sudden chill sweeping through them just before the tower comes into view, as if something unseen is brushing past in a hurry to reach the lookout before they do. From a distance, the tower stands empty, but those who climb the final stretch of the trail swear they sometimes see movement near the top, shifting shapes near the railing, faint outlines of figures leaning over the edge as though surveying the forest below. These figures vanish the moment hikers blink or adjust their focus. One man said he saw a person crouched near the corner of the platform, bracing against the wind, but when he called out, the figure simply dissolved into the fading light. Once inside, the tower feels colder than the air outside, even in summer. The first floor creaks under each step, but visitors often hear footsteps coming from the observation level above. Slow, dragging steps. Sometimes quicker ones, like someone pacing back and forth in agitation. Hikers call out, expecting another visitor, but their voices echo unanswered up the narrow stairwell. The stories of the chains are among the most unsettling. Unlike the phantom footsteps or the ghostly silhouettes seen near the railing, the rattling chains have a physicality to them that sends nerves jangling. The sound often begins subtly, like metal lightly brushing against wood. Then, without warning, it intensifies, chains scraping, clanging, dragging across the observation floor as if pulled by unseen hands. Some visitors freeze in place, terrified that whoever or whatever moves above might descend the stairs toward them. One night, a pair of campers decided to stay near the tower, hoping to catch a meteor shower. As darkness fell, they climbed the tower for a better view. While sitting quietly, they heard chains rattling behind them. Moments later, the observation room door slammed so hard, the entire tower vibrated. They fled down the stairs and refused to return for the rest of the night. One of them later admitted he felt as though something was standing inches behind him, right before the door slammed. Doors slamming is a recurring phenomenon at Eagle Peak Tower. The observation room door, long warped by weather and no longer attached to a working latch, somehow still manages to shut itself with violent force. Even on windless nights, hikers have heard it crash open and close repeatedly, as though someone unseen is pacing the floor, entering and exiting the room in frustration or duty. A few witnesses have described hearing the hinges groan, followed by the unmistakable sound of someone grabbing the handle and pulling it tight. Yet the moment they check the door, no one is there. The observation floor, the highest and most exposed part of the tower, is where the atmosphere becomes the thickest. Visitors describe the air as dense and electric. Shadows move in ways that don't match the angle of the moon, shifting along the edges of the railing. Several people have seen a figure standing motionless near the northern corner of the platform. The figure always appears with its back turned, arms resting against the railing, head slightly bowed. When approached, the figure fades, leaving behind a deep cold that lingers long after it disappears. One hiker swears that as she reached the top step, she saw a tall silhouette standing in the center of the observation room. Its outline was faint, like a reflection in rippled water. Yet, she clearly saw its head turn toward her. Before she could move, the chains rattled violently behind her, and the door slammed shut. When she pushed her way inside, the room was empty, but the air felt heavy enough to choke her. She left immediately and refused to hike alone again. Local residents, especially older ones, claimed that the tower's strange activity began long before it was officially abandoned. They whisper about a watchman who disappeared during a fierce autumn storm, a man known for pacing the observation deck and securing equipment with heavy chains before every shift. Some say he was last seen leaning over the railing, scanning the forest for signs of wildfire. When the storm broke and the crew returned, he was gone. No tracks, no signs of a fall, no explanation. His chains were left behind, scattered across the floor. Whether the tales are true or not, hikers continue to witness the same phenomena. The figures near the railing, the dragging chains, the echoing footsteps, and the slamming doors that seem to hold conversations with the wind. Each experience adds a layer to Eagle Peak Tower's haunted reputation, turning it into a place where the past refuses to fade. By day, the tower stands silent and still, blending into the vast expanse of the Sawtooth National Forest. But by night, it becomes something else entirely, a crossroads of memories and shadows, where ghostly figures linger on the edge of the platform and chains rattle under unseen weight. Those who climb its stairs in the dark often leave with a single haunting impression. Eagle Peak Tower is not abandoned. It is occupied by something that never stopped keeping watch. Deep in the rugged stretches of the Nez Perce Water National Forest stands the remnants of the Bitterroot Firewatch, a long-abandoned lookout tower perched above a sea of ancient pine and cedar, weathered, skeletal, and silent in the daylight. The tower looks like nothing more than an old relic of the forest, servicing other forgotten structure, slowly yielding to time. But travelers who wander too close at dusk soon discover that the Bitterroot Firewatch is anything but empty. Something lingers there, something that moves through the treetops and whispers through the understory, shadowed in ways no living thing should be. Hikers often describe their first sign of the tower's presence as a strange stillness that settles over the forest. Birds fall silent, insects fade away, and the wind becomes a heavy breath moving through the branches. It's as though the entire landscape pauses to listen, waiting for the visitor to take another step. Some say they feel the moment they cross an unseen boundary, one foot grounded in ordinary forest, the next in a place brushed by spirits and echoes. The strangest accounts are those involving the treetops. Long before hikers see the tower, they report glimpses of silhouettes standing among the branches of towering pines. These shapes are tall, slender, and impossibly still, often appearing 50 or 60 feet above the forest floor where no person could stand. They do not sway with the trees, nor do they retreat when spotted. Instead, they remain fixed, watching quietly. Some hikers have tried to focus on them, only for the figures to dissolve like smoke drifting away on a breeze. Others say the silhouettes shift slightly, as if turning their heads to follow whoever walks below. One couple, hiking late in the afternoon, noticed a row of these figures standing in the canopy along the ridge. The trees were darkening in the fading light, but the silhouettes stood out clearly: 5, maybe 6 forms, motionless and tall, each in a different tree. When the hikers looked away for a brief moment and glanced back, all the figures were facing them, not moving, not stepping forward, just facing them. As the couple hurried downhill, they heard faint creaking from the trunks above, almost like the sound of someone shifting weight on old wooden boards. Approaching the Bitterroot Firewatch itself often triggers another layer of strange encounters. A faint pressure, like a subtle weight on the shoulders, settles over visitors as they draw near. The tower appears through the trees as a skeletal structure, its platform partially collapsed, the stairs warped, the roof panels rusted or missing. But what unnerves hikers most isn't the sight of decay. It's the unmistakable sound of footsteps coming from the tower. The footsteps are deliberate and slow, pacing across the remains of the lookout floor. They echo down the rotted stairs, creaking with purpose. More than one visitor has turned around after hearing approaching steps behind them, only to find the trail completely empty. Others report footsteps walking alongside them, keeping pace for several yards before fading into the underbrush as though swallowed by the forest itself. Whispers are common too, hushed murmurs that drift on the air like conversations carried from a great distance. They seem to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Sometimes they rise from the base of trees. Other times they travel along the ground, curling around roots and stones before passing close to a hiker's ear. The whispers never form clear words, but they always feel intentional, like a warning or a question too faint to understand. One man claimed he heard his name spoken softly while climbing the hill toward the tower. The voice came from just behind him. When he turned, the forest was still and empty. But the whisper came again, this time drifting from the direction of the treetops. He left without climbing the final stretch. Some visitors report feeling followed from the moment they neared the tower, on unseen presence walking behind them, matching their steps, keeping close enough that the hairs on their arms rise with instinctive dread. A few hikers have stopped abruptly to see if the phantom companion would continue moving. They swear they heard an extra step linger in the silence before fading away completely. Nightfall brings the most chilling accounts. The silhouettes in the treetops multiply, gathering in clusters around the tower like a silent audience. Their shapes blend with the branches, but their outlines remain discernible, darker than shadow and more solid than mist. The tower itself seems to breathe, boards shifting, steps creaking, loose metal rattling in rhythms too steady to be wind-driven. Some hikers who ventured close after sunset insist they saw movement on the top platform. Not a ghostly flicker or faint blur, but a full, dark figure walking the perimeter, pausing at the railing as though scanning the forest for signs of danger. Exactly what Firewatch crews once did. Local lore suggests the tower was operated by a dedicated lookout named Alden Pierce, a man known for pacing the observation deck from sunset to sunrise during the height of wildfire seasons. When the tower was hit by lightning in the early 1960s, the crew returned to find the structure heavily damaged and Alden gone. No remains were ever found, no trail leading away from the tower, no sign of him descending the mountain. Some believe he was thrown into the forest by the force of the strike. Others believe he continues his watch in ways that no longer belong to the living. Whether or not Alden's spirit lingers, something undeniably moves through the Bitterroot Firewatch area. Shadowy silhouettes gather in the treetops. Footsteps echo with no visible source. Whispers drift through the branches like restless souls searching for a listener. Visitors leave with the unsettling feeling that they were not merely watched, they were studied, followed, and perhaps even weighed against some unknown measure. The tower stands weathered and hollow now, yet the forest around it remains alive with unseen movement. Those who walk the trail alone often emerge believing they were never truly alone at all. In the heart of the Nez Perce Clearwater National Forest, the Bitterroot Firewatch remains a place where shadows climb higher than humans can reach, where whispers travel farther than any voice should, and where the line between the living and the lingering grows thin as a blade of pine. High in the sweeping wilderness of the Salmon Chalet National Forest stands the Mount Idaho Tower, a weather-beaten firewatch post long abandoned but never truly silent, built on a ridge that catches the last rays of daylight before the forest sinks into night. The tower was once a guardian of the mountains. These figures appear solid at first glance, fully formed against the backdrop of the darkening sky, but when approached, they vanish instantly, dissolving into the air like mist. One group of hikers watched a figure climb a full flight of stairs before disappearing at the landing. Convinced another traveler was ahead of them, they called out, only to be met with silence. When they finally reached that same landing, they found the boards dusty and undisturbed, as though no one had stepped there for decades. The only fresh marks were their own. As night draws closer, strange lights begin to flicker in the observation room. Some visitors describe a cold, bluish glow soft at first, then pulsing like a lantern being shaken by an unsteady hand. Others see sharp, bright flashes, as though someone is turning a flashlight on and off in rapid succession. The tower has no electricity, its wiring long, stripped, and rusted, yet these lights behave like signals or warnings. Locals say it resembles the way forest lookouts once communicated with distant posts, flashing coded messages through the night. One hiker, camping a short distance from the ridge, woke in the middle of the night to find the observation deck glowing brightly. The light flickered through the surrounding trees, casting thin beams across the forest floor. At first, he thought it was lightning on the horizon, but the flashes were too rhythmic, too precise. Then came the unmistakable sound of a metal alarm bell ringing once, sharply, as though someone had pulled it with purpose. The sound echoed off the cliffs before fading into the distance. He packed his gear and left before sunrise. The reports of alarms are among the most chilling. Visitors describe hearing short, abrupt rings, the kind used to signal emergency in old watchtowers. Sometimes the sound is faint, barely audible over the wind. Other times it's loud and crisp, startling hikers enough to send them stumbling backward. A few claim they've even heard the old crank mechanism turning, scraping, and grinding, as if pulled by unseen hands. But when they investigate, the alarm contraption is rusted solid, immovable. More unsettling still are the voices. Not loud, not clear, but unmistakably human. They drift down from the observation deck, rising and falling like distant radio chatter. Some hikers describe them as muffled conversations, as if multiple people are speaking urgently, but quietly. Others hear only one voice, a calm, steady male voice calling out short phrases. They can never make out the exact words, but the tone is unmistakably that of someone giving instructions, issuing warnings, or calling coordinates into the void. When she climbed the stairs to investigate, she found the wind still, the air freezing, and the room empty, except for the feeling that someone had been standing there moments before. The footsteps stop instantly, as though the unseen presence is aware of being watched. Only when hikers begin moving again do the steps resume, synchronizing once more with the rhythm of their journey toward the tower. One visitor described hearing footsteps not just behind him, but circling him, soft, rapid steps that moved swiftly from one side of the trail to the other, weaving through the trees. No matter how quickly he turned his head, he saw nothing but stillness. But the sensation of being surrounded by multiple unseen companions was undeniable. He turned back before reaching the tower, convinced that if he continued forward, whatever paced alongside him would soon step into view. Then there are the lights. The Panther Creek Firewatch has no functioning power source. Its wiring was removed decades ago, the generator dismantled and hauled down the mountain by the last crew who worked there. Yet strange lights flicker around the tower in the dimming hours of the day. They appear as faint pulses at first, brilliant flashes behind the cracked windows of the observation room, or dim glows drifting near the base of the structure, like lanterns carried by invisible hands. Sometimes the lights move with startling precision, blinking on and off in a slow, deliberate rhythm. Other times they shimmer erratically, like sparks thrown from an unseen fire. Several visitors who camped nearby swear they saw the entire top platform glow for a brief moment, a pale bluish-white illumination that cast long shadows down the hillside. The tower stood like a beacon in the darkness, glowing long enough for them to doubt their own senses before abruptly plunging back into the night. But the most disturbing phenomena have little to do with sights or sounds. They are felt. As hikers approach the final stretch of trail leading to the tower, many describe a sudden pressure pressing down upon them. It begins subtly, like a weight on the shoulders. Then it intensifies, growing heavier with each step. Some liken it to the sensation of a large animal crouching behind them. Others say it feels like an unseen force leaning into their spine, urging them to turn back. A few visitors become lightheaded or nauseated as they near the base, overwhelmed by the oppressive atmosphere that seems to seep from the tower itself. One woman who approached the tower at twilight reported feeling as though the air around her had thickened. Breathing became a chore, her chest tightening as if a pair of strong hands were pushing inward. Her flashlight flickered wildly, its beam sputtering and dying even though the batteries were brand new. As she stepped closer, she felt the weight shift, no longer pressing from behind, but settling atop her shoulders like a cold, heavy cloak. She managed only a few steps before turning and fleeing, the invisible force lifting only when she reached the tree line below. Those who do make it to the tower describe an atmosphere charged with static, as though the air hums with some unseen energy. The boards creak beneath their feet, but the sound is never isolated. It is always joined by additional footsteps, some light and hurried, others slow and dragging. These steps echo across the observation deck above and along the stairwell, accompanying visitors no matter where they stand. The tower feels alive with motion, yet no physical movement can be seen. Inside the observation room, the feeling of being watched becomes almost unbearable. Many hikers claim they sense someone standing inches behind them, though every time they turn, the room remains empty. The lights that flicker inside cast warped shadows that seem to move independently of their source. The wind feels strangely warm in some corners and icy in others, as if invisible presences drift leisurely through the space. Local folklore whispers of a lookout who refused to leave his post during a massive storm decades ago. Lightning struck the tower repeatedly, and the forest below erupted in flames. The story goes that he remained at his station, sending signals and ringing alarms until the very last moment, even after the tower was engulfed in heat and smoke. When the storm passed and crews struggled up the mountain, they found the tower damaged but still standing. The lookout, however, had vanished. No trace of him ever recovered. Whether his spirit lingers or the tower has become a vessel for the intense memories of those days, no one can say. But the reports remain consistent. Phantom footsteps pacing unseen paths. Strange lights flickering in abandoned rooms. A heavy presence pressing down on those who dare approach. The Panther Creek Firewatch has become more than an old structure. It is a place where the past clings with a grip so strong it bleeds into the present. By night, the tower seems to awaken, its shadows shifting, its unseen occupants moving with purpose. Visitors leave with the same lasting impression. Panther Creek is not empty. Something watches, something walks, and something presses close enough to make even the bravest hikers turn back long before reaching the summit. High in the rugged slopes of the Payette National Forest, perched atop a rocky ridge, stands the Silver Creek Tower. Once a vital lookout for forest fires, it now leans against the sky like a silent sentinel, long abandoned, yet refusing to disappear into the wilderness. From a distance, it appears unremarkable, a weathered wooden structure surrounded by towering pines and jagged outcroppings. But hikers and explorers who venture close quickly sense that the tower is far from empty. Something lingers there, shadowed, restless, and aware. The first signs of activity are often subtle. Visitors speak of the feeling of being watched long before they reach the tower. Birds fall silent, and even the wind seems to hesitate, creating a stillness so thick it presses against the skin. The forest smells sharper here, the scent of pine and damp earth intensified, as if nature itself is holding its breath. Many hikers describe a faint vibration in the air, almost like a pulse, guiding them toward the ridge, while warning them that this is a place not meant for casual intrusion. Once they reach the tower, the strange occurrences intensify. Shadowy figures have been reported inside the observation room, figures that move with a slow, deliberate grace, often appearing along the edges of the wooden floor or near the windows. They are rarely clear in shape, more like darkened outlines than fully formed humans, but their presence is undeniable. Some visitors swear they saw someone pacing in the room, moving with a rhythm that suggests urgency. Though when they step inside, the room is empty. The shadows vanish, leaving only the faint impression that someone or something was just there. Faint whistles are another common phenomenon. The sound drifts through the forest like a breeze, high and airy, barely audible, yet piercing in its unnatural clarity. It rises and falls in patterns that seem intentional, almost like a language. Hikers who hear it often pause, scanning the surrounding trees and the tower itself. But the source is never apparent. Some say the whistling seems to follow them, rising when they ascend the stairs and fading when they turn away. Others hear it inside the observation room, echoing as if a figure is pacing, stopping occasionally to listen for a response that never comes. Knocking adds another layer of mystery. Soft at first, like someone tapping a walking stick against the floorboards, it grows steadily louder and more insistent. Visitors describe it as irregular, sometimes hurried, sometimes slow and deliberate, like footsteps on boards hidden beneath the dust. Many hikers report feeling a rhythm, almost as if the knocking mimics a heartbeat, pulsing in the walls themselves. When they attempt to investigate, there is no one there. The stairs, floors, and windows are undisturbed, yet the sound persists, echoing in the empty structure, as though the tower itself is alive with memory. One couple climbing the ridge at dusk described a particularly chilling encounter. As they reached the observation room, they saw a dark figure moving near the railing, its outline sharp against the fading light. The figure paused and seemed to watch them, but when they called out, it dissolved into the shadows of the room. Then, almost immediately, a series of soft whistles drifted through the space, accompanied by knocking along the floorboards. Every time they stepped closer, the sounds shifted, as though the unseen presence was moving away just enough to remain out of reach. They left quickly, the echo of footsteps and taps following them down the stairs. The tower's history only deepens its haunted reputation. Silver Creek Tower was manned for decades by a series of fire lookouts, each dedicated to scanning the dense forest for signs of smoke or flame. One lookout, in particular, a man named Henry Caldwell, was known for pacing the observation deck night after night, alert for danger, even when storms raged around him. In the late 1950s, during a fierce thunderstorm, Caldwell vanished without a trace. His logbook remained open on the observation deck, and his radio equipment was found carefully stacked, as if he had planned to return within minutes. But he never did. Search parties found no sign of him, no tracks leading away, no indication of what had happened. Locals now claim his presence remains, pacing silently in the observation room, whispering in whistles, knocking as he did in life. Visitors often describe a sudden weight when approaching the tower. The air seems thicker, pressing down on their shoulders and chest, making movement feel sluggish. Some hikers report dizziness or shivers, attributing it to altitude or the cold. Others recognize it as the presence of something unseen, a force aware of their intrusion, nudging them away from more, warning them toward something they cannot see. The sensation grows strongest as dusk falls, when shadows stretch and the line between the tower and the surrounding forest seems to blur. The interior of the observation room is a small, square space lined with old wooden planks. Visitors report that, despite years of abandonment, the floorboards sometimes creak as if someone is walking just out of sight. Shadows shift along the corners and windows, flickering with the movement of branches outside, yet never fully aligning with natural light. Some hikers swear they see shapes linger behind the windows, figures pacing or waiting, then vanishing when approached. The combination of sound, shadow, and sensation creates an atmosphere that feels alive and intensely aware. Lights are occasionally reported in the tower as well. Some describe faint glows drifting along the floor. Others see sharp flickers near the ceiling. The effect is subtle and fleeting, often disappearing when the observer turns or blinks. Hikers speculate that these are either remnants of old equipment or manifestations of the presence that haunts the tower. Either way, the phenomenon adds to the tower's reputation as a place where the past refuses to rest. By nightfall, Silver Creek Tower becomes a focal point of the forest's deepest quiet, where whispers, knocks, whistles, and shadows converge. Those who climb its stairs alone often leave with a sense that they were not alone, that the tower itself has absorbed the memories of decades of watchmen and now moves in a rhythm all its own. Visitors who linger too long sometimes feel pursued. Others are content merely to observe the subtle movements of darkness, the soft tapping of unseen feet, and the faint whistling that drifts through the still air. Silver Creek Tower stands weathered but unyielding, a monument to vigilance, to memory, and to something unseen that refuses to leave. Hikers depart with stories of shadows pacing in the observation room, of knocks echoing across empty floors, and of whistles drifting on the wind. And long after they have gone, the tower remains awake, quietly observing the forest, quietly pacing, and quietly waiting for the next visitor to step into its realm. The shape was tall and motionless at first, then slowly began to descend. He froze, watching as it glided down, step by step. When he finally mustered the courage to call out, there was no response. And when he reached the landing moments later, the stairwell was empty. Only the faint echo of footsteps remained, lingering long after he had turned to leave. Cold hands brushing past visitors are another recurring phenomenon. These are not the brisk gusts of wind that whip through the tower's exposed frame. nor the occasional snow or rain that drifts through cracks. They are deliberate, chilling touches, light yet unmistakable, grazing shoulders or brushing along arms as if unseen fingers were tracing the path of the hikers. When she spun around, there was no one there. Only the silent wooden walls of the stairwell and the heavy, still air of the forest outside. Faint voices often accompany the ghostly shapes and cold touches. They are low, almost imperceptible, drifting from the observation platform above or from the stairwell itself. The words are rarely clear, often breaking into fragments, like distant conversations carried across the treetops. Hikers report hearing whispers that sound like warnings, names called softly, or indecipherable phrases that rise and fall with the wind. One visitor swore he heard the voice of an old lookout calling his name, urging him back down the stairs, though no one had been on the ridge for decades. Many who climb the tower describe an oppressive heaviness in the air as they near the observation deck. It feels as though the weight of decades of solitude, vigilance, and unseen watchers presses down upon them. The sensation is strongest in the late afternoon, when shadows stretch long across the stairwell and the forest below turns dusky and quiet. Some hikers report that the cold brushes and whispered voices become more pronounced at this hour, as though the spirits of past lookouts are still patrolling their post, ensuring that the forest remains safe even in their absence. One group of campers, drawn by the sunset glow, approached the tower to take photographs of the surrounding peaks. As they stepped onto the first landing, a dark shape materialized near the upper stairs. One of the friends reached out instinctively, and the cold brush of a hand startled her, making her gasp. At the same moment, a faint whisper, barely audible, drifted from above. A warning, a name, or perhaps a question. The group retreated quickly, shaken, though they later admitted they felt no anger from the unseen presence, only awareness, as if the tower itself was alive and observing every move. The history of the North Fork Firewatch adds to the haunting. Long ago, a series of dedicated lookouts kept the tower operational, patrolling the stairs and observation deck day and night. One lookout, a man named Samuel Hartley, was particularly meticulous, pacing the stairs for hours to scan the forest for signs of smoke or flame. During a late autumn storm, Hartley vanished from the observation deck without a trace. Crews, who arrived days later, found the tower intact but empty. No tracks led away, no sign of struggle, only the echo of footsteps that seemed to linger in the stairwell. Locals say his spirit remains bound to the tower, continuing his endless vigilance. Visitors who return often describe a sense of rhythm to the phenomena. The shadows near the stairs appear in cycles, moving as though repeating the steps of past occupants. The cold brushes happen most frequently near landings, places where the past lookouts may have paused to scan the forest. The whispers rise and fall in patterns, almost like a conversation repeating across decades. Fragments of messages meant for eyes and ears, no longer alive to receive them. Even the observation deck, exposed to the sky and the wind, is not free from the tower's restless presence. Hikers describe feeling watched from the corners, sensing figures at the edge of vision. The air grows unnaturally cold, and the whispering intensifies, sometimes sounding like multiple voices converging from the treetops below. Those who linger too long report a growing pressure, as though the weight of the tower's history itself presses down upon them, urging them to descend before they are drawn further into the unseen rhythms of the tower. Despite her, perhaps because of its haunting, the North Fork Firewatch continues to draw visitors. Its allure lies not only in the sweeping views of the Clearwater National Forest, but also in the lingering presence that makes the tower feel alive, a place where the past refuses to rest. The shadowy figures, cold brushes, and whispers create an experience that is at once terrifying and mesmerizing. A reminder that some places carry the weight of memory so heavily that it bleeds into the present. By nightfall, the North Fork Firewatch stands silent to the casual eye, bathed in moonlight and the quiet of the forest. But to those who have dared its stairs, it remains a place of motion and memory. Shadowed forms continue to pace, whispers drift on the wind, and the faint touch of cold fingers reminds visitors that the tower is never truly empty. It is a sentinel still, watching, listening, and waiting for the next person to step inside its haunted presence. Built decades ago to watch for forest fires, the tower is now abandoned, its wooden frame bleached by years of sun, wind, and snow. Many pause mid-step, sensing that they are not alone, though no other hikers are in sight. Once they reach the base, the activity becomes more pronounced. These sounds are often accompanied by sudden drafts that sweep through the stairwell and observation room. The windows, cracked and clouded with age, occasionally reflect these figures back at visitors, creating the eerie illusion of multiple presences. Lights flicker along the floor or walls without source, and the air grows sharply cold in their vicinity. Whispers, soft, unintelligible, sometimes drift across the deck, mingling with the sounds of footsteps and alarms to create an almost tangible atmosphere of tension and anticipation. Shadowy figures climb the tower, alarms ring, and the stairwell echoes with unseen movement. The drafts and chilling touches remind visitors that the tower is not abandoned. It remains occupied not by the living, but by echoes of the past, by spirits bound to a duty that continues long after life has faded. Those who leave Elk Mountain Tower often describe a lingering unease, the echo of footsteps, the memory of cold drafts, and the shapes glimpsed at the top remain vivid in their minds. The tower stands, silent yet alive, a sentinel that refuses to rest. Visitors depart with the understanding that Elk Mountain Tower is not merely a relic. It is a place where the past continues its watch, where shadows climb stairs, alarms ring in empty halls, and the forest below remains under the gaze of watchers who have never truly left. Many report a heavy stillness that presses against their chest, as if the forest itself is warning them to pause, to take notice, before they continue up the final trail to the tower. Shadowy figures are frequently reported gliding along the stairwell, visible through the worn planks or through gaps in the boards. These shapes are fleeting, humanoid in form but vague, often moving with a fluid grace that defies natural motion. Some visitors have seen these figures pacing slowly, ascending the stairs as though on patrol, only to vanish entirely when approached. Others describe the sensation of the figures moving past them on the stairs, the air around their shoulders growing cold as if brushed by unseen hands. Distant, haunting whistles often accompany these shadowy appearances. The sound drifts across the ridge and through the forest, high-pitched and eerie, rising and falling like a song with no melody. Hikers report that the whistles often seem directional, coming from the observation deck or the stairwell, and occasionally responding to movement below. Some have felt compelled to answer with their own voice, only to find that their echo is absorbed into the wind, returning not as a reply but as a distorted, hollow sound that sends shivers down their spine. Voices are another phenomenon that makes Bear Paw Firewatch truly unsettling. Visitors have described hearing fragments of speech, faint and wavering, drifting from the upper reaches of the tower. Often, these voices repeat numbers, coordinates, or names in a slow, deliberate cadence, as if marking time or delivering a message only partially meant for the living. One hiker recounted climbing the stairs when he heard a sequence of numbers whispered over and over. Each step he took seemed to synchronize with the pace of the repetition. When he reached the top, there was no one there, only the quiet hum of the forest and the faint echo of the numbers fading into the wind. The stairwell itself seems alive with motion. Boards creak under invisible weight, footsteps echo even when no one is present, and the shadows shift along the walls as if moving independently of any light source. Some visitors report feeling sudden cold drafts sweep past them while climbing, gusts that seem to rise from nowhere, chilling them to the bone. Others describe a sense of being followed, of footsteps pacing just behind them, perfectly timed with their shoulder to find the stairs empty. One evening, a small group of hikers attempted to reach the observation deck at dusk. As they ascended, a shadowy figure appeared near the midpoint of the stairwell, gliding upward with deliberate purpose. At the same time, a series of soft, high-pitched whistles echoed from the deck, accompanied by faint tapping sounds, like someone walking deliberately on the wooden planks. The cold drafts become sharper, footsteps and tapping grow louder, and the faint whistles take on a rhythmic insistence, almost like a heartbeat synchronized with their own. Some report a mix of fear and fascination, unable to step away until the sequence breaks, as if the tower itself allows them to witness its restless guardians only briefly. Even when the forest is quiet and the wind still, the tower continues its eerie vigil. Shadowy figures glide along the stairwell, haunting whistles drift on the night air, and voices repeat numbers or names in an endless cycle. The phenomenon is subtle yet persistent, leaving visitors with the sense that the tower is never empty, that the echoes of its past watchmen linger on, guarding a forest that no longer requires vigilance. By nightfall, Bear Paw Firewatch becomes an island of motion in the silent expanse of trees. The figures at the top of the tower, the footsteps in the stairwell, the chilling drafts, and the haunting whispers combine to create an atmosphere of tension and awe. Visitors leave with the lingering feeling that the tower is alive, not in the sense of human habitation, but as a repository of memory, duty, and presence. Each shadow, each sound, and each cold breeze is a reminder that the watch never ends, that the ghosts of past lookouts continue to pace their stairs, whistle into the night, and repeat the numbers and names that bind them to the tower, century after century. Perched high on a remote ridge in the Salmon Chalet National Forest, Red River Tower rises above the dense expanse of pine and fir, a silent witness to decades of changing seasons. Once a crucial firewatch station, the tower has long been abandoned, its weathered wood and rusted hardware standing as a testament to the forest's enduring presence. One woman described climbing the tower alone at twilight when she heard steady, measured steps descending behind her. Each time she paused to listen, the steps stopped. When she resumed, they began again, perfectly timed to her movements. The feeling of being watched often intensifies in the tower's upper levels. Visitors describe a prickling sensation along their spine, a subtle but persistent awareness that unseen eyes are observing them. The sensation is strongest near the stairwell and the observation deck, where shadows linger in corners and the air grows colder. Some hikers report turning quickly, expecting to see someone standing just out of sight, only to find the space empty. Others describe a fleeting sense of movement in their peripheral vision, shadows that shift and sway but disappear whenever they attempt to focus on them directly. One group of campers approached Red River Tower as dusk fell, hoping to photograph the surrounding peaks. As they neared the base, a figure appeared on the observation deck, backlit by the last rays of sunlight. The hikers hesitated, their hearts pounding, before ascending the stairs. Halfway up, they heard the unmistakable echo of footsteps coming down behind them, light yet deliberate. When they reached the deck, the figure was gone, but the wind carried faint whispers and a subtle chill, as if the tower itself had breathed around them. The hikers left quickly, but all later agreed they had felt a profound sense of being observed, even as they descended into the forest below. The history of Red River Tower offers some context for its haunting. For decades, lookouts stationed at the tower were tasked with scanning the forest for signs of smoke or fire, a duty requiring vigilance day and night. One particularly meticulous lookout, named James Whitmore, vanished during a late summer storm in the mid-20th century. Search parties found the tower intact but empty, with Whitmore's logbook still open on the observation deck. No footprints, no tracks, no evidence of his departure could be found. Since then, locals claim that his presence or the echoes of all lookouts who once manned the tower remains, pacing the stairs, standing silently on the deck, and watching over the forest he once guarded. Visitors who linger too long report a mix of auditory and tactile phenomena. The wooden boards beneath their feet sometimes creak in a pattern that seems intentional, like someone pacing above or below. Cold drafts sweep through the stairwell, brushing against arms and shoulders as if invisible hands are present. The combination of footsteps, whispers, and chilling touches leaves a lasting impression, making the tower feel alive in a way that is impossible to explain. Even on clear days, Red River Tower exudes a subtle tension, but it is at dusk and into the night that the haunting intensifies. Shadows cling to the stairs and the observation deck, footsteps echo relentlessly, and the weight of unseen eyes is felt in every corner. Hikers often leave with a lingering unease, haunted by the figure they glimpsed, the echoes they heard, and the feeling of being watched even long after they have returned to the trail below. Red River Tower continues to stand, weathered yet unyielding, a sentinel both of the forest and of memory. Shadowy figures pace the stairwell, footsteps echo in empty spaces, and unseen eyes watch from above. Visitors depart with stories of fleeting apparitions, whispered warnings, and a presence that refuses to leave, understanding that the tower is more than wood and nails. It is a place where the past continues its vigil guarding the mountains and the forest in silence, just as it always has. Rising from the dense pine slopes of the Boise National Forest, Pine Ridge Firewatch Tower perches like a sentinel over the rugged wilderness below. Built decades ago to monitor the forest for signs of fire, the tower has long been abandoned, yet it remains a magnet for hikers, explorers, and those drawn to its eerie reputation. Locals whisper of phantom figures, mysterious sounds, and inexplicable phenomena that occur after dusk, and visitors report experiences that make the forest seem alive in ways that defy explanation. The tower, though empty, hums with a presence that is both subtle and undeniable. Approaching the tower, hikers often notice a change in the air. The usual forest sounds, the rustling of leaves, birdsong, or distant animal calls fade into an almost oppressive quiet. Even the wind seems to hesitate, curling through the trees with a deliberate stillness. Many report a sense of being watched long before they reach the tower, an unshakable awareness that eyes unseen are tracking their movements. The forest floor seems to stretch unnaturally beneath their feet, and shadows cling longer than they should, stretching toward the tower in strange patterns as the sun begins its descent. The first signs of supernatural activity are often subtle, yet unmistakable. Phantom figures appear at dusk, moving silently along the tower or near its base. These figures are dark and indistinct, their shapes human, yet shadowy, gliding rather than walking. Hikers have described seeing figures pacing along the observation deck, their forms visible through the weathered windows, only to vanish when approached. Others report fleeting glimpses near the stairs, as though the figures are ascending or descending, keeping their presence just out of reach. The shapes rarely interact with the living, but their appearance is enough to make the air feel charged and alive. Inside the tower, doors slam without cause. Visitors climbing the stairs or entering the observation room often hear a sudden bang, the forceful echo of wood striking wood, even though the tower is long abandoned. Sometimes multiple doors slam in succession, as though a series of invisible hands are moving through the structure, checking each landing. The sounds are not random. They seem deliberate, timed with the presence of visitors, heightening the sense that the tower itself is aware of their intrusion. The flickers are brief, almost teasing, and are often accompanied by a subtle change in temperature, a sudden chill that spreads through the air. Some hikers believe the flickering lights are echoes of the past, residual energy from the tower's operational days when lookouts spent long nights scanning the forest for smoke or fire. Others see them as manifestations of the phantom figures, moments when the unseen becomes briefly visible to those who dare to linger. Footsteps climbing the stairs are another persistent phenomenon. Hikers report hearing the steady rhythm of shoes on wood, slow and deliberate, sometimes pacing in patterns that suggest intent. One group of friends approached Pine Ridge Firewatch just before sunset, intending to watch the valley below from the tower's observation deck. As they ascended the stairs, a faint figure appeared at the top, barely distinguishable against the dimming sky. The friends hesitated, feeling a sudden chill, and the tower seemed to hum with tension. Then a series of doors slammed in rapid succession, and the wooden boards beneath their feet creaked as if pacing steps accompanied their own. The figure vanished, leaving the friends shaken, yet deeply fascinated by the inexplicable energy surrounding the tower. The history of Pine Ridge Firewatch adds to its haunted reputation. For decades, lookouts were stationed here to keep watch over the forest, spending long hours in isolation. Many of the lookouts were meticulous and dedicated, walking the stairwell and pacing the observation deck in strict routines. Over the years, several were reported missing during storms or under mysterious circumstances, their disappearances never fully explained. Locals believe that the spirits of these dedicated watchers remain, replaying their routines in the stairwell and observation room, echoing the life they once led. The doors, the footsteps, and the flickering lights are seen as remnants of that presence, a lingering trace of duty, unbroken by death. Visitors often describe a growing tension as they linger in the tower at dusk. The phantom figures, the slamming doors, and the flickering lights converge, creating an atmosphere that is both thrilling and unnerving. Some hikers report a feeling of being followed, of footsteps pacing just behind them, synchronized with their own. Others describe an almost hypnotic rhythm in the slams and creaks, as though the tower itself is guiding them, testing their courage before allowing them to leave. Even after visitors depart, the impression of Pine Ridge Firewatch lingers. Many speak of the phantom figures they glimpsed, the footsteps that echoed in empty halls, the doors that slammed without cause, and the flickering lights that seemed almost alive. The tower stands silent yet restless, a sentinel in the Boise National Forest that continues its watch long after the living have gone. It is a place where past and present converge, where shadow and sound shape the experience of every visitor, and where the memory of those who once manned the tower endures, pacing the stairwell, appearing at dusk and remaining forever bound to the ridge they once guarded. Rising above the rugged peaks of the Clearwater National Forest, Clearwater Summit Tower stands as a solitary sentinel against a vast expanse of trees and sky. Built decades ago to monitor the forest for fires, the tower now remains abandoned, weathered by time and the elements. From a distance, it appears dormant, a simple wooden structure perched atop the ridge. But those who approach after dusk quickly realize that the tower is far from empty. Shadows move along the observation deck, low whispers drift on the wind, and sudden cold drafts brush against the skin, creating an atmosphere that unsettles even the most seasoned hikers. Visitors often notice a change in the forest as they near the tower. The usual ambient sounds, birdsong, rustling leaves, distant animal calls fade, replaced by a heavy, unnatural stillness. The air grows cooler and more stagnant, and shadows seem to stretch and twist in unusual ways. Some hikers report feeling the weight of unseen eyes on them, as if something or someone is observing from high above. Even the path itself appears different at dusk, with the fading light casting long, strange shadows that seem to move independently of the trees and rocks. The first phenomena usually appear on the observation deck. Shadowy figures are reported gliding along the railings or pacing silently across the worn boards. They are sudden, sharp, and deliberate, brushing against arms and shoulders with the sensation of invisible fingers. Hikers report feeling a distinct drop in temperature as they approach the observation deck or stairwell, often coinciding with the appearance of shadowy figures or the rise of whispers. Shadows appeared to move along the deck above, elongated and indistinct. As the hikers ascended the stairs, low whispers drifted through the air, fragmented and unintelligible, yet strangely rhythmic. They felt cold drafts brush past them as they climbed, the sensation like invisible hands guiding or warning them. When they reached the observation platform, the shadows had vanished, but the whispers lingered, mingling with the quiet sigh of the forest. Granite Falls Tower rises sharply above the jagged ridges of the Sawtooth National Forest, a solitary wooden sentinel overlooking miles of untouched wilderness. Built decades ago to watch for forest fires, the tower now stands abandoned, its weathered timbers bleached by sun, wind, and snow. At a distance, it seems dormant, a relic of an era long past. Yet those who venture near after dusk quickly realize that the tower is far from empty. Ghostly figures appear near the top, faint alarms echo through the still air, footsteps resonate along empty stairwells, and whispers drift on the wind, creating an atmosphere of suspense and unease that makes the forest around it feel alive in ways visitors cannot explain. The approach to Granite Falls Tower is deceptive. The trail leading up the ridge begins, like any other forest path, rocky, steep, and lined with towering pines and firs, but hikers quickly notice the forest becoming unnaturally quiet. Birds stop their calls, small animals seem to vanish, and even the wind appears to soften as the tower grows nearer. Visitors often describe a subtle, almost imperceptible pressure, as if unseen eyes are tracking their movements. The shadows of the trees stretch longer than they should, and the last golden rays of sunlight filtering through the canopy feel like they are being watched, their light almost deliberate in the way it dances across the trail. Once the tower comes into view, the haunting begins. Ghostly figures are frequently reported near the observation deck at the top of the tower. They are described as shadowy shapes, vaguely human in form, sometimes pacing along the deck or standing motionless as if scanning the forest below. Visitors report that these figures appear briefly, often vanishing when approached. Some hikers have seen them reflected in the tower's old, weathered windows, only to realize the deck is empty when they reach the top. These figures are rarely threatening, yet their presence is unsettling, evoking the sense that the tower itself is occupied by memories, by echoes of those who once manned it. Footsteps are another frequent phenomenon. The narrow stairwell inside the tower seems alive with movement. Visitors often hear the unmistakable sound of boots on wood, slow and deliberate, ascending or descending the stairs. Yet when hikers reach the source, the stairwell is always empty. Many describe the footsteps as perfectly timed with their own, rising and falling in tandem with their steps, as though someone is pacing just behind them. Some have paused mid-step to listen more closely, only for the sound to continue uninterrupted. A phantom presence, moving independently of any living person. Alarms sometimes sound from the tower, even though it has been decommissioned for decades. Visitors report hearing faint metallic clangs or bell-like echoes that resonate through the ridge. The sounds often appear randomly, sometimes coinciding with the sighting of shadowy figures or footsteps in the stairwell. Hikers have described standing at the base of the tower, feeling the vibration of the echoes in the air around them, only to find no equipment or mechanism capable of producing the noise. The alarms leave a lasting impression, reinforcing the feeling that the tower is still, in some inexplicable way, operational. Faint human voices are occasionally reported by those brave enough to linger after dusk. These voices are soft and fragmented, drifting from the stairwell or observation deck. They often sound like murmured conversations, sometimes repeating names or numbers, though they are never clear enough to be understood. Visitors describe the experience as unnerving, especially when combined with the shadows and footsteps. Some feel the voices are echoes of past lookouts, carrying on the routines and duties they performed for decades, their presence lingering long after life has left the tower. One group of hikers arrived at Granite Falls Tower near twilight, hoping to photograph the sunset from the observation deck. As they climbed the trail, the forest fell silent around them. Approaching the tower, they noticed a shadowy figure pacing near the top, visible through the weathered windows. A faint alarm echoed in the distance, a metallic clang that reverberated through the tower's frame. As they ascended the stairs, footsteps seemed to match their own, echoing rhythmically from above. At the landing, the hikers heard a faint murmur of voices, unintelligible, yet distinct, drifting from the deck. When they reached the top, the figure had vanished, leaving only the empty deck and a sudden cold draft that swept through the observation room, heightening their sense of unease. The history of Granite Falls Tower offers clues to its spectral activity. For decades, it was manned by dedicated fire lookouts who patrolled the observation deck and stairwell day and night, scanning the forest for signs of smoke or fire. One particularly diligent lookout, Samuel Harlan, disappeared mysteriously during a spring storm. Search parties found the tower intact, with his logbooks open on the observation deck, yet no trace of him was ever found. Locals claim that his spirit, and perhaps the spirits of other lookouts, continued to pace the deck and stairwell, repeating routines and echoes from a time when the tower was fully operational. The shadows, footsteps, alarms, and whispers are believed to be manifestations of these lingering presences, performing duties that death has not freed them from. Visitors who linger too long report a growing sense of tension. The combination of ghostly figures, footsteps, alarms, and whispers creates an immersive, almost tangible atmosphere. Cold drafts sweep across the deck and stairwell, brushing against arms and shoulders, while shadows flit just at the edge of vision. Hikers report feeling as though they are being watched, followed, and tested by invisible forces, a subtle pressure urging them to leave before the encounter grows overwhelming. Yet despite the unease, many find themselves drawn to linger, fascinated by the continuity of presence and memory that seems to inhabit the tower. Even during daylight hours, Granite Falls Tower holds a subtle tension, but it is after dusk that the haunting becomes pronounced. Shadowy figures glide along the observation deck. Footsteps echo in the empty stairwell. Alarms clang without cause, and whispers drift through the air. Visitors leave with lingering memories of sights, sounds, and sensations that cannot be explained. A persistent impression that the tower is never truly empty. Granite Falls Tower is more than a structure of wood, and nails it is a place where the past continues its vigil, where the forest and the ridge remain under the watch of those who have long since passed, and where each visitor glimpses only a fragment of its restless, spectral life. Rising above the dense wilderness of the Payette National Forest, Lost Lake Firewatch Tower stands isolated on a rocky ridge overlooking the tranquil waters of Lost Lake below. Built decades ago to monitor the forest for fires, the tower has long been abandoned. Yet it continues to draw visitors and hikers intrigued by its reputation for strange occurrences. Shadowy shapes are seen climbing the narrow wooden stairs. Cold hands brush against shoulders. The tower, though long unused, hums with an eerie energy, a lingering presence that seems tied to the forest itself. The approach to Lost Lake Firewatch Tower often feels like stepping into another realm. The forest along the trail is dense with pines and firs, their branches interlacing to form natural corridors of shadow. Visitors often report a subtle heaviness in the air, a sense that unseen eyes are following their every step as they near the tower. Upon reaching the base of the tower, the first signs of the supernatural become apparent. Shadowy shapes are frequently observed moving along the stairwell, ascending and descending with a fluid motion that seems almost inhuman. These shapes are vaguely humanoid, their forms indistinct and dark, often disappearing when approached. Some hikers report seeing multiple figures pacing along the stairs or the observation deck, while others describe a single silhouette that pauses to glance downward before vanishing entirely. The presence of these shadows is accompanied by an eerie stillness, a sense that the tower itself holds its breath as if aware of the living who dare enter its domain. Visitors climbing the narrow wooden steps often hear footsteps echoing in rhythm, deliberate and unhurried, matching the pace of an unseen companion. Many hikers describe the experience as unnerving, sensing that the tower itself is alive with the movements of those who once manned it. Occasionally, the sounds of footsteps accelerate or pause in synchronization with the visitor's own steps, amplifying the feeling of being accompanied by a phantom presence. Some hikers pause mid-ascent, expecting to see someone, only to find the stairwell empty and silent, save for the creak of weathered boards underfoot. One group of campers approached Lost Lake Firewatch Tower at twilight, hoping to watch the sunset over the ridge. As they neared the base, the forest fell into a heavy silence. Shadowy shapes appeared climbing the stairs, their movement fluid and deliberate. The hikers felt cold gusts sweep past them, brushing shoulders and arms like invisible hands. From the surrounding treetops, faint whispers drifted through the air, rising and falling in fragmented tones that made the hairs on their arms stand on end. The hikers ascended the stairs cautiously, each step met with a corresponding echo from above, until they reached the observation deck. By then, the shadows had vanished, leaving only a chill in the air and a lingering impression of unseen eyes watching from every corner of the tower. The history of Lost Lake Firewatch Tower helps explain its lingering presence. Visitors leave with memories of sights, sounds, and sensations that linger long after the forest trail fades behind them. Lost Lake Firewatch Tower is more than wood and nails. It is a place where the past endures, where the spirits of those who once kept watch continue their vigil, and where every visitor is reminded that some presence cannot be left behind, haunting both the ridge and the forest for generations to come. Eagle Ridge Tower rises alone atop a rugged ridge in the Boise National Forest, its weathered timbers standing against the sky as a silent sentinel over miles of dense forest below. Built decades ago to monitor for wildfires, the tower has long been abandoned. Yet those who venture near after dark speak of strange occurrences that cannot be explained. Phantom lights flicker in the observation room, footsteps echo along empty stairs, and hikers often feel an oppressive presence, as if unseen eyes are following their every move. The tower, though deserted, hums with an eerie energy, a lingering echo of the past that seems to persist in the structure itself. The approach to Eagle Ridge Tower is deceptively calm. The trail winds steeply through pine and fir, shaded and quiet. Yet as hikers near the ridge, the forest seems to change. Birds fall silent, the usual rustle of small animals ceases, and even the wind seems to hesitate, curling softly through the trees in ghostly currents. Many visitors report a sudden heaviness in the air, a sensation that someone or something is watching from above. Shadows stretch unnaturally across the forest floor, seeming to cling longer than normal, while the last rays of sunlight fade behind the peaks, bathing the trail in a dim, uncertain light that heightens every sense. The first signs of the tower's strange presence often appear in the observation room. Phantom lights have been reported flickering within the small, weathered structure, glowing briefly through the dusty windows. These lights appear without explanation. There is no electricity, no batteries, no equipment capable of producing them. Many hikers report glancing over their shoulder, expecting to see someone standing silently behind them, only to find the space empty. Some hikers feel that the tower itself is aware of their presence, observing their reactions, measuring their courage, and deciding how long to allow them to remain. Even in daylight, Eagle Ridge Tower retains an aura of subtle unease, but after dusk, the haunting becomes undeniable. Phantom lights appear in the observation room, footsteps echo along the empty stairs, and an oppressive presence weighs on anyone who climbs the tower. Visitors leave with memories that linger, shadows glimpsed in the corner of an eye, lights that vanish when looked at directly, and a feeling of being observed that cannot be shaken. Eagle Ridge Tower is more than a wooden structure. It is a place where the past endures, where the spirits of lookouts continue their vigil, and where each visitor is reminded that some presence cannot be left behind. Silently watching over the Boise National Forest for generations to come. Shadows stretch unnaturally across the trail, and the fading light seems to cling to the ridges, creating a dim, eerie glow that sets every nerve on edge. Ghostly figures have been reported pacing along the top, their forms vaguely human, yet shadowy and indistinct. They often appear briefly, visible through the weathered railings and windows, only to vanish when approached. Some hikers have seen multiple figures, moving as though performing the duties of a lookout, while others describe a single shape, standing motionless, scanning the forest below. The figures rarely interact with the living, yet their presence is impossible to ignore, instilling a sense of both awe and unease. Though the tower has been decommissioned for decades, hikers often report hearing metallic clangs or bell-like echoes that resonate from the summit. The sounds are irregular and unpredictable, sometimes coinciding with sightings of ghostly figures on the deck or footsteps along the stairs. Some feel the voices respond to their movements, creating a sensation that the forest itself is communicating, echoing the vigilance and concern of past lookouts who spent countless hours watching over the ridge. The stairwell inside the tower adds another layer to the haunting. Visitors climbing the narrow wooden steps often hear footsteps echoing above or below them, deliberate and measured, as though someone invisible is pacing alongside them. As they neared the summit, the air seemed to grow heavier, and the usual forest sounds fell away. Ghostly figures appeared on the observation deck, pacing slowly along the railings, their movements deliberate and human-like. A faint alarm rang through the still air, its metallic echo vibrating against the rocky ridge. As the hikers ascended the stairs, they heard the rhythm of footsteps echoing from above, and whispers drifted on the wind, urgent and insistent, impossible to interpret fully. When they reached the top, the figures vanished, leaving only a lingering chill in the air, and a profound sense of being watched long after the encounter ended. The history of Salmon Summit Firewatch Tower helps to explain the strange occurrences. For decades, lookouts were stationed here, often working alone in long, isolated shifts. Their duties involved pacing the observation deck, scanning the forest for smoke or signs of fire, and maintaining the tower's equipment. Some reports suggest that several lookouts disappeared under mysterious circumstances during storms or isolated shifts, never to be seen again. Locals believe that the spirits of these dedicated men continue to patrol the tower and surrounding ridge, repeating their routines in shadow, sound, and light, bound to a place they served with vigilance. The ghostly figures, alarms, and whispers are thought to be remnants of this lingering presence, echoes of duty that refuse to fade. Visitors who linger too long often report a growing sense of unease. Pine Creek Tower rises sharply above the rugged ridges of the Nez Perce Clearwater National Forest, a solitary wooden structure that has watched over the dense wilderness for decades. Originally built to monitor for wildfires, the tower has long been abandoned. Yet hikers and visitors speak of strange and unexplainable phenomena that continue to occur within and around it. Shadowy figures move silently along the tower. Distant alarms echo through the still forest. Footsteps ring out on empty stairs, and some visitors even hear the faint sound of their own names being called. The tower seems to exist in a realm between the present and the past, a place where memory, vigilance, and lingering presence have converged into a haunting that continues to draw both curiosity and unease. The trail leading to Pine Creek Tower winds through dense pines and firs, rocky slopes, and occasional clearings that offer sweeping views of the surrounding forest. At first, the path appears ordinary, marked by well-trodden dirt and scattered boulders, but as hikers near the tower, the atmosphere shifts. The forest seems to grow quieter. Birdsong fades, the rustle of small animals disappears, and the wind itself becomes muted, curling gently through the branches as though it carries messages from the tower above. Many visitors describe a subtle pressure in the air, a feeling of being watched by unseen eyes that follow each step along the trail. Shadows stretch unnaturally long across the forest floor, moving in ways that defy the fading light, adding an undercurrent of unease to the ascent. The tower itself is where the phenomena become most apparent. Shadowy figures are frequently reported moving along the stairs and observation deck, their forms vaguely human but indistinct, slipping through corners and along railings as if gliding rather than walking. Visitors describe catching glimpses of them out of the corner of their eye, only for the shapes to vanish when looked at directly. Some hikers have seen multiple figures pacing along the observation deck, repeating the motions of long-departed lookouts who once maintained the tower, while others report a single silhouette standing silently, surveying the surrounding forest. These apparitions are never threatening, but carry an undeniable weight, a presence that seems to observe every movement of those who venture near. Footsteps are another common occurrence at Pine Creek Tower. Hikers climbing the narrow wooden stairs often hear the echo of shoes above or below them. Deliberate and measured, yet when they reach the steps, the stairwell is empty. Many report the footsteps as synchronized with their own, rising and falling in rhythm as though they are accompanied by a phantom observer. Occasionally, the sounds pause or shift unpredictably, creating the impression that the tower itself is alive with movement, replaying routines and moments that occurred decades ago. The echoing steps leave a lingering sense of being followed, even after visitors have descended back to the forest floor. Distant alarms are also reported by visitors, adding another layer to the tower's haunting. Though the Firewatch system has long been decommissioned, hikers frequently describe hearing faint metallic clangs or bell-like sounds coming from the tower or surrounding ridge. The noises often appear without warning, sometimes coinciding with the sighting of shadowy figures or footsteps on the stairs. One visitor described pausing mid-trail as a low resonant alarm rang across the ridge, a sound both urgent and unplaceable, leaving an indelible sense that the forest was still being watched and that someone or something was issuing warnings to those below. Perhaps the most unnerving phenomenon reported at Pine Creek Tower is the sound of names being called. Visitors often describe hearing faint, almost whispered voices, sometimes calling their own names or uttering words that seem urgent yet indistinct. The voices drift on the wind, rising from the treetops or the stairwell, and follow hikers along the trail or toward the observation deck. Some feel the voices respond to their movements, appearing to warn, guide, or even test them. The effect is disorienting, creating a sensation that the forest and tower are alive with memory, actively interacting with the living in ways that defy logic. One group of hikers approached Pine Creek Tower at twilight, intent on photographing the ridge and surrounding forest. As they ascended the trail, the forest grew unnaturally quiet. Shadowy figures were visible along the stairwell and observation deck, moving with fluid, deliberate motions. Faint footsteps echoed in the narrow stairwell, perfectly synchronized with their own steps, while a low metallic alarm rang briefly from above. As they reached the deck, the figures vanished, yet the whispers persisted, carrying fragmented voices through the treetops and along the ridge. Each hiker reported feeling the pressure of unseen eyes upon them, a presence that remained even after they descended back into the forest below. The history of Pine Creek Tower offers insight into the haunting. Some lookouts vanished mysteriously during storms or severe weather, never to be found. Locals believe the spirits of these dedicated observers linger, performing their duties long after death, manifesting as shadowy figures, footsteps, alarms, and whispers. The tower, steeped in decades of vigilance and solitude, seems to preserve their presence, replaying fragments of life, duty, and watchfulness that refuse to fade. Visitors who linger too long often describe a growing sense of unease. The shadows, footsteps, alarms, and whispers combine to create an almost tangible atmosphere, a presence that presses close to the skin and weighs on the mind. Cold drafts sweep through the stairwell and observation deck, brushing past arms and shoulders like invisible hands. Shadows flicker just beyond sight, and faint voices float through the air, fragmented but insistent. The tower seems to measure visitors' courage, observing their reactions and maintaining its silent vigil over the forest below. Even during daylight, Pine Creek Tower holds a subtle tension, but it is after dusk that the haunting becomes pronounced. Shadowy figures move silently along the stairs and observation deck. Footsteps echo where no one walks, alarms ring faintly, and whispers of warning drift through the forest. Visitors leave with vivid memories of sights, sounds, and sensations that linger long after they have descended the ridge. Pine Creek Tower is more than a wooden fire lookout. It is a place where the past endures, where shadows and echoes preserve the routines of those who once kept watch, and where every visitor is reminded that some presences cannot be left behind. Silently observing the Nez Perce Clearwater National Forest for generations to come. Bitterroot Ridge Firewatch Tower stands alone atop a steep ridge in the Payette National Forest, overlooking miles of dense forest and rugged terrain. Built decades ago to monitor the wilderness for wildfires, the tower has long been abandoned, yet it remains a place steeped in eerie occurrences. Phantom figures are frequently observed at dusk. Sudden chills sweep across visitors without warning, whispers drift through the trees, and faint, flickering lights appear in the observation room. The tower seems to exist as a bridge between the living and the past, where memories and lingering presence are etched into every timber and board, making it a magnet for hikers and those drawn to the unexplained. The trail leading to Bitterroot Ridge Tower begins innocuously enough, winding through dense pines, firs, and underbrush. Small streams trickle along the path, and occasional clearings offer breathtaking views of the surrounding mountains. Yet as visitors ascend, the forest atmosphere subtly shifts. Birds fall silent, small creatures vanish from sight, and even the wind seems to pause, moving in gentle, deliberate currents. Many hikers report an almost imperceptible pressure in the air, a sensation of being watched by unseen eyes. Shadows stretch longer than they should, twisting and flickering in the dim light, and a quiet tension builds with every step toward the summit. At dusk, the haunting becomes most pronounced. Phantom figures are frequently observed on the observation deck, moving with deliberate but fleeting motions. Some are described as shadowy silhouettes, pacing the edges of the railing, while others glide silently along the wooden floorboards, vanishing when approached. Their forms are vague and indistinct, yet unmistakably human in shape, evoking the sense of former lookouts still performing their duties long after the tower has been abandoned. Visitors often describe these figures as both unsettling and captivating, a presence that seems to acknowledge their intrusion while maintaining a strict separation from the living. Inside the tower, the observation room is a focal point for strange phenomena. Faint flickering lights appear at random, casting brief glows on dusty surfaces and illuminating empty corners. The lights vary in intensity and duration, sometimes pulsing slowly and other times flaring unexpectedly before vanishing entirely. Hikers report that the lights are always accompanied by a sudden chill in the air, a temperature drop that penetrates clothing and leaves the skin tingling. The flickering illumination seems to carry a presence with it, as though the room itself remembers the countless hours once spent monitoring the forest from its vantage point. Whispers are another common occurrence. Visitors often hear faint murmurs drifting through the trees or along the ridge, rising and falling with the wind. These voices are fragmented, sometimes repeating names, issuing warnings, or uttering phrases that are impossible to fully understand. Many hikers describe the whispers as urgent yet elusive, appearing to follow them along the trail or within the tower itself. Some feel that responding to the voices is impossible. The sounds shift or vanish when attention is focused on them, creating a disorienting effect that makes the forest and tower feel alive with memory and presence. Footsteps echoing along the tower's stairs further enhance the sense of a lingering presence. Visitors climbing the narrow wooden steps often hear boots on the old boards, deliberate and measured, sometimes matching their own pace. Others describe the footsteps as moving independently, rising and falling with no discernible pattern. The sounds frequently pause or accelerate, giving the impression that the tower itself is replaying routines from the past. Hikers who pause mid-ascent often feel a subtle pressure behind them, as if someone is pacing silently, observing, and ensuring that the rituals of vigilance continue despite the absence of living lookouts. One evening, a small group of hikers approached Bitterroot Ridge Firewatch Tower just as the sun was beginning to set. The forest grew quiet, the last birdsong fading into the distance. As they reached the base of the tower, shadowy figures appeared along the stairwell, moving with fluid, deliberate motions. A faint chill swept through the air, brushing against their arms and shoulders. Faint whispers drifted on the wind, rising from the treetops and echoing around the ridge. When the hikers climbed to the observation deck, the figures vanished, leaving only a lingering cold and the subtle flicker of lights within the room. Even as they descended back toward the forest floor, the sense of being watched remained, a silent presence that seemed to follow them down the trail. The history of Bitterroot Ridge Tower helps explain its lingering energy. For decades, dedicated lookouts were stationed there, working long, solitary shifts to monitor the forest for smoke and signs of fire. Many spent countless hours pacing the stairs, checking equipment, and maintaining vigilance over the surrounding wilderness. Some reports indicate that a few lookouts vanished under mysterious circumstances during storms or during isolated night shifts, leaving behind empty rooms and unanswered questions. Locals believe the spirits of these watchful observers remain, performing their duties through shadow, light, and sound. The phantom figures, flickering lights, footsteps, and whispers are thought to be manifestations of these lingering presences, carrying forward the routines and vigilance of the past. Visitors who linger too long often report an intensifying sense of unease. The shadows, sudden chills, whispers, and flickering lights converge into an almost tangible presence, pressing close to the skin and weighing on the mind. Cold drafts sweep through the stairwell and observation deck, brushing past arms and shoulders like invisible hands. Shadows twist at the edge of vision, fleeting and elusive. The whispers rise and fall, impossible to fully understand, yet urgent and insistent. The tower appears to measure each visitor's courage, silently observing, assessing, and continuing its long vigil over the Payette National Forest. Even in daylight, Bitterroot Ridge Firewatch Tower retains an air of subtle tension. But after dusk, the haunting becomes undeniable. Phantom figures appear on the deck, footsteps echo along the stairs, whispers drift through the wind, and faint lights flicker in the observation room. Visitors leave with vivid memories of sights, sounds, and sensations that linger long after they have returned to the forest below. Bitterroot Ridge Firewatch Tower is more than a wooden structure. It is a place where the past endures, where shadows and echoes preserve the routines of those who once kept watch, and where every visitor feels the weight of unseen eyes silently observing the Payette National Forest for generations to come. Mount Jefferson Firewatch Tower stands atop a rugged peak in the Sawtooth National Forest, a solitary wooden sentinel rising above the dense forest canopy. Built decades ago to monitor the surrounding wilderness for wildfires, the tower has long been abandoned. Yet it continues to draw hikers, adventurers, and those fascinated by the unexplained. Shadowy figures appear along the stairwell. Cold drafts sweep across visitors without warning. Phantom footsteps echo along empty floors, and unexplained noises ripple through the treetops, creating an atmosphere both eerie and compelling. The tower seems to exist in a space between past and present, where memories of vigilance and solitude linger, shaping the experiences of those who venture near. The trail leading to Mount Jefferson Firewatch Tower begins through thick pine and fir, winding along steep slopes and rocky outcrops. At first, the forest seems tranquil, alive with the sounds of birds, rustling leaves, and the occasional creek. Yet as hikers ascend toward the summit, the environment subtly shifts. Birds fall silent, small forest creatures disappear from view, and even the wind moves in slower, hesitant currents. Many visitors report a growing heaviness in the air, a sense of being observed by unseen eyes. Shadows stretch unnaturally across the trail, twisting and flickering as the light fades, and the forest seems to hold its breath in anticipation of those approaching the tower. Shadowy figures are among the most frequently reported phenomena at Mount Jefferson. They are often seen gliding along the narrow stairwell, moving in ways that appear deliberate, yet fleeting, sometimes pacing the stairs as though performing a long-forgotten routine. Hikers describe these forms as vaguely human, their outlines blurred and indistinct, visible only for brief moments before vanishing when looked at directly. Some visitors report seeing multiple figures on the observation deck, appearing to conduct the same duties that lookouts once performed, while others describe a solitary shadow standing silently, surveying the forest below. The figures do not interact aggressively with the living, yet their presence is profoundly unsettling. As if the tower itself is replaying its past with a quiet insistence. Cold drafts accompany these apparitions, appearing without warning or explanation. Hikers report sudden, icy gusts that sweep across the stairwell and observation deck, brushing against shoulders and arms. The temperature shift is sudden and penetrating, leaving a lingering chill that is impossible to shake. Many describe the drafts as feeling almost deliberate, moving along with the hikers or brushing past them in a way that suggests awareness, as though the tower and its phantom occupants are conscious of each visitor's presence. Phantom footsteps are another common occurrence. Visitors climbing the wooden stairs often hear the echo of boots or shoes following them up or down. Deliberate and measured, though no one else is present, the sound sometimes synchronizes perfectly with the hiker's own steps, then shifts unpredictably, creating the sense of an unseen companion pacing just out of sight. Other hikers report hearing footsteps on the observation deck while standing at the base of the tower, an auditory illusion that reinforces the impression that the tower is alive with memory, repeating routines from decades past. Unexplained noises also emanate from the surrounding treetops and forest. Visitors report faint, clanging, creaking wood, and distant, unintelligible murmurs drifting on the wind. Sometimes the sounds resemble tools or equipment being moved. At other times, they carry the cadence of human voices, whispering warnings or repeating fragmented phrases. Many hikers describe the noises as directional, moving with them as they navigate the trail or ascend the stairwell. The combination of auditory and visual phenomena creates an immersive experience, a haunting that engages every sense and leaves an indelible impression long after leaving the ridge. One evening, a small group of hikers approached Mount Jefferson Firewatch Tower just as the sun was beginning to dip behind the surrounding peaks. The forest fell into a heavy silence, and the usual chorus of wildlife disappeared. As they reached the base, shadowy figures were visible along the stairwell, gliding silently and pacing with measured steps. Cold drafts swept past their shoulders, and faint footsteps echoed up the stairs in rhythm with their own. Unexplained noises drifted from the treetops, soft clanging and whispers that seemed to rise and fall with the wind. As they ascended to the observation deck, the figures vanished, leaving only the lingering chill and the faint echo of voices, footsteps, and unseen movement. The hikers descended in silence, the impression of unseen eyes tracking their movements remaining long after they left the ridge. The history of Mount Jefferson Firewatch Tower provides context for its haunting. For decades, lookouts were stationed in isolation, patrolling the observation deck, climbing the stairs, and monitoring the forest for any signs of fire. Many spent long hours alone, and some disappeared under mysterious circumstances during storms or periods of severe weather. Local legend holds that the spirits of these dedicated individuals remain bound to the tower and ridge, continuing their watch in shadow and sound. The phantom figures, footsteps, cold drafts, and eerie noises are seen as manifestations of these lingering presences, echoes of a time when vigilance and solitude were constant companions. Visitors who linger too long often report a growing sense of unease. Shadowy figures, cold drafts, phantom footsteps, and whispers converge to create a tangible, almost oppressive presence. The stairwell and observation deck feel alive, with fleeting shadows, sudden chills, and sounds that seem to respond to movement. Hikers often feel the tower measuring their courage, silently observing and maintaining a vigilant presence over the forest below. Even in daylight, the tower retains a subtle tension, but as dusk settles, the haunting becomes undeniable. Mount Jefferson Firewatch Tower is more than an abandoned structure. It is a place where the past endures, where shadow and sound preserve the routines of long-departed lookouts, and where every visitor feels the weight of unseen eyes silently watching over the Sawtooth National Forest. Phantom figures glide along the stairs, cold drafts press against the skin, footsteps echo on empty floors, and mysterious noises ripple through the treetops. Visitors leave with vivid memories of a tower alive with presence, an enduring reminder that some spirits refuse to rest, continuing their watch over the wilderness for generations to come. Final haunted tower stands alone atop a jagged ridge in the Boise National Forest. Its weathered timbers silhouetted against the sky as the last remnant of a bygone era of forest fire vigilance. Long abandoned, the tower has earned a fearsome reputation as the final haunted Firewatch tower in the region. Phantom figures are said to roam the observation deck. Footsteps echo along the wooden stairs when no one is present, and whispers drift from the surrounding trees, calling out in faint, urgent tones. Locals warn that anyone approaching after dark risks encountering the spirits of firewatchers, trapped forever, silently standing vigil over forests that no longer burn, their presence lingering in the twilight long after human activity has ceased. The trail to final haunted tower winds steeply through dense pine, fir, and cedar, following narrow ridges and rocky slopes. During the day, the path appears serene and unremarkable, but as hikers ascend, the atmosphere begins to shift. Birds fall silent, small animals vanish from view, and even the wind seems hesitant, curling softly through the branches as though carrying the whispers of those who once worked in the tower. Visitors often describe a sudden heaviness in the air, a subtle pressure that suggests they are not alone. Shadows stretch and twist along the trail, lingering longer than they should, and the final ascent to the summit seems to carry a sense of foreboding that cannot be explained by the terrain alone. The first signs of the haunting typically appear on the observation deck. Phantom figures have been reported pacing the edges of the platform, moving slowly and deliberately, performing tasks as though the tower is still fully operational. Some figures appear fully formed but shadowed, while others are vague outlines, visible only from the corner of one's eye. Many hikers describe seeing multiple forms, silently observing the forest below, while others encounter a single figure standing motionless, its gaze fixed on the horizon. The repetition of footsteps, perfectly timed or erratic, gives the impression that the tower itself retains memory, replaying routines of long-departed firewatchers who spent countless solitary hours ascending and descending those same stairs. Whispers from the surrounding trees are another element that unsettles visitors. Carried on the wind, the voices are faint and fragmented, often resembling names or brief warnings. Hikers report that the whispers seem to follow them along the trail or echo back from the forest, rising and falling with the movement of the wind. Some describe the voices as urgent yet elusive, impossible to fully comprehend, creating the sensation that the forest and tower are alive, communicating through sound and presence. The combination of whispers, footsteps, and figures produces an almost tangible feeling that the tower and its surroundings are conscious of those who approach, silently observing every movement. Cold drafts frequently accompany the ghostly figures and auditory phenomena. Visitors report sudden drops in temperature as they near the tower or ascend its stairs, chills that brush across arms and shoulders and seem to move in tandem with their progress. The air feels dense and heavy, pressing against the body, reinforcing the impression that an unseen presence is near. Some hikers describe stepping onto the observation deck and feeling a pervasive chill, as if the spirits of the firewatchers are standing directly beside them, invisible but undeniably present. One evening, a group of hikers approached Final Haunted Tower, just as the sun dipped behind the distant ridges. The forest fell into a profound silence. The usual sounds of birds and rustling leaves vanished. As they reached the base of the tower, shadowy figures were visible along the stairwell, gliding silently and pacing with deliberate steps. Footsteps echoed above and below them, in perfect rhythm with their own movements. Whispers rose on the wind, carrying fragments of warnings or names. Impossible to fully decipher, yet undeniably urgent. A few lookouts reportedly vanished mysteriously during storms or severe conditions, leaving behind empty stairwells and unanswered questions. Local legend holds that these dedicated watchers remain bound to the tower, replaying their routines in shadow, sound, and light. Phantom figures, echoing footsteps, and whispers are believed to be manifestations of these lingering presences, carrying forward the vigilance that death could not erase. Visitors who linger too long often report an increasing sense of tension. Shadowy figures, phantom footsteps, whispers, and cold drafts converge into a presence that feels almost tangible, pressing close to the skin and weighing on the mind. Shadows twist and flicker at the edge of vision. Footsteps repeat in irregular patterns, and whispers rise and fall with the wind. The tower seems to measure each visitor's courage, silently observing and maintaining the eternal vigil over the Boise National Forest. Even in daylight, Final Haunted Tower retains an aura of subtle unease, but after dark, the haunting becomes undeniable. Phantom figures roam the observation deck, footsteps echo on the stairs, and whispers call from the surrounding trees. Visitors leave with vivid memories of sights, sounds, and sensations that linger long after they descend the ridge. Final Haunted Tower is more than a relic of Firewatch history. It is a place where the past endures, where shadows and echoes preserve the routines of long-departed watchers, and where anyone who dares approach after dark can feel the weight of unseen eyes, silently guarding forests that no longer burn. These are the haunted Firewatch towers of Idaho, where phantom figures climb lonely stairs, whispers drift across the treetops, and cold drafts follow unseen presences. Each tower holds a history of vigilance, tragedy, and spirits who remain bound to their posts long after their deaths. If you ever find yourself standing beneath one of these towers at night, listen carefully. Footsteps may echo above you, shadows may move where no one stands, and the wind may carry whispers from watchers long gone. The past lingers here, alive in ways the living cannot comprehend. Thank you for exploring Idaho's haunted Firewatch towers with me. Stay cautious, stay curious, and always respect the spirits who remain, standing vigil over the forests, watching, waiting, and never leaving.